This is my story of how I took down my terrible neighbor Karen for vandalizing my car. I fought back with my lawyer, and what she did was a shock to me. So, Karen had always been a neighbor of mine, living just a few houses down the street. We'd cross paths occasionally, but we were never particularly close. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was jealous of my house and the life that I'd built for myself. My home was my pride and joy. It was a place that I'd worked hard to make as comfortable and beautiful as possible. I had recently acquired a new car, one that I'd been dreaming of for years. It was a sleek, shiny, and powerful machine, and I absolutely loved it. Well, as it turned out, Karen had always wanted a car just like mine, but couldn't afford it. She had also been envious of my house, which was bigger and more impressive than her own. Her jealousy became really intense, and she could not stand just seeing me living my best life. Instead of working to improve her own situation, she decided to take a destructive route. How sad is that? Anyway, one early afternoon, I was relaxing in my living room. I was watching TV when I heard a loud crash outside. It scared me to death, so I rushed over to the window. I wanted to see what had happened. My heart absolutely sank as I saw the source of the commotion. There was Karen, standing beside my brand new car, a sledgehammer in her hands. She was slamming it into the car with a primal rage that I just had never seen before. The loud, sickening thuds echoed throughout the neighborhood as she mercilessly attacked my beautiful ride. I could not believe my eyes, and a surge of that same primal rage that she had, mixed with disbelief, coursed through my veins. My feet moved before my mind could catch up, and I stormed outside, shouting at Karen, demanding to know what on earth she was doing. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with hate and madness. Her lips curled into a sly grin, as if she had achieved some sort of twisted victory. "You think you're so much better than everyone else with your fancy house and that car," she sneered. "I can't stand it anymore, so I thought I'd teach you a lesson." In a blind rage, I grabbed my phone and began recording her. She continued to bash my car with the sledgehammer, completely oblivious to the fact that she was being captured on video. In a way, her arrogance actually helped me, as her sinister grin was undeniable evidence of her actions. When she had finally had her fill of destruction, she dropped the sledgehammer and began to walk away, thinking that she got away with her crime. But she had no idea that her wicked deed had been caught on camera. Well, there's more. Once I was sure that she was gone, I rushed inside and reviewed the footage. Her face, filled with malice and glee as she destroyed my car, sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to do something about this. I had to expose her for the criminal that she was. So what did I do? I decided to take the evidence to the police. Wouldn't have you? It wasn't an easy decision, as I knew it would likely lead to a confrontation with my neighbor. And I hate confrontation. I try to avoid it whenever I can because it's just so uncomfortable. But I couldn't just let her get away with such a blatant act of destruction, especially when I had the proof. It did hurt to record, but I knew I had to do it. I walked into the local police station, I presented the video footage, and I recounted the entire incident. The officer on duty was shocked at the clear evidence that I'd provided. He assured me that they would do everything in their power to bring Karen to justice. With the police now involved, I knew it was only a matter of time before they tracked Karen down. Her careless actions had left her exposed and vulnerable, and she was about to learn that you can't escape the consequences of your actions. You can only run for so long, but you can't hide, Karen. A few days later, the police located Karen and brought her in for questioning. She was caught completely off guard, unable to comprehend how her plan had unraveled so quickly. When confronted with the hard evidence, she had no choice but to confess to her actions. How could you not? She was charged with malicious destruction of property and arrested on the spot. With Karen in police custody, I felt a sense of relief and justice, but the ordeal was far from over. The damage to my car was extensive, and I had no choice but to contact my insurance company to assess the situation. And we all know dealing with insurance sucks. The insurance adjuster arrived to inspect the wreckage and estimated the cost of the repairs. Unfortunately, the damage was so severe that the car was deemed a total loss. While I was devastated by the loss of my dream car, I was grateful for insurance, which would cover the cost for a replacement. A few weeks later, I received a check from my insurance company to cover the cost of a new car. It was a bittersweet moment, as the car I had loved was gone, and you just can't replace sentimental value. But at least I was getting a fresh start, right? I began the process of shopping for a new vehicle, trying to put the traumatic incident behind me. However, the consequences for Karen were just beginning to unfold. She was facing legal charges, and I wasn't even about to let her off the hook easily. Can you blame me? I decided to file a civil lawsuit against her, seeking compensation not only for the damage to my car, but also for the time and stress that this incident had caused me. I hired a lawyer who specialized in personal injury and property damage cases. He meticulously reviewed the evidence and began building a case against Karen. He was confident that we had a strong chance of winning, especially given the clear video evidence of her actions. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I wanted to hold Karen accountable for what she had done and ensure that justice was served. My lawyer and I arrived at the courthouse and ready to present our case. As the proceedings began, my lawyer presented the video footage, which left the judge and jury in shock. It was clear that Karen had committed a malicious act of destruction out of envy and spite. The courtroom was filled with tension, and it was evident that Karen's actions were indefensible. There is one very important thing that I have to mention. As the trial continued, it became clear that Karen was nowhere to be found. She had failed to appear in court, which was a huge mistake on her part. The judge issued a warrant for her arrest, and the case proceeded without her presence. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me compensation for the damage to my car and the emotional distress that I'd endured. The judgment also included punitive damages to deter Karen and others from similar acts of vandalism in the future. With the court's decision in my favor, I felt a sense of closure and justice. Karen had been held accountable for her actions, and I had received compensation for the damage to my car and the time that I had spent dealing with the aftermath of her destructive act. The legal consequences didn't stop there for Karen. Her failure to appear in court did lead to her arrest, and she faced additional charges for her evasion of the law. She was ultimately sentenced to probation, community service, and offered to pay restitution for the damages, which were all well-deserved, mind you. The entire incident had a profound impact on Karen's entire life. Not only had she lost her freedom and been ordered to pay for her destructive actions, but her reputation in the community was irreparably tarnished. She had gone from being envious of my life to being pitied and shunned by those around her. This HOA Karen lies about a position of power, has cars towed, and then says the cops are lying with their rules. How can they shut her down? This incident occurred approximately July 2023. I moved into a lovely townhome community located in Pasco County, Florida, and immediately took notice of the parking situation. A family resident member's vehicle received a sticker on the driver's window stating illegally parked, with the added threat of being subsequently towed. The vehicle did not block traffic, nor did it impede the road throughway whatsoever. In fact, 95% of the vehicle was on or over the driveway. When we politely asked why in a private Facebook group, we were immediately informed via an authoritative response from the group's self-appointed moderator, whose words spoke on behalf of the HOA. We have had to agree to certain rules by the county, or we will be fined again. The moderator continued, all the tires have to be on the pavers. After we responded for clarification, the moderator barked. The rules state that all 4 tires, and actually the rear end of the car, need to be on the pavers. She apparently appears to speak on behalf of the HOA, did not make the rules, and actually no part of the vehicle can be on the street. If we do not comply with the rules, then the HOA is the one that is fined $5,000 per incident, which is then passed on to the owners. We cannot afford to do that. As an aside, I have resided in this same Florida county for over 20 years and have never heard of this excessive rule and law. Hence, I reached out to a few friends who are Pasco Sheriff, as well as the Pasco Code Compliance, all of which irrefutably stated that the moderator's words were 100% false and uncorroborated, nor is the slightly protruding vehicle a county offense. I captured screenshots of the discussion with the moderator as appeared on our private Facebook group, that is, prior to the moderator deleting the entire discussion and blocking our account from further interaction. Talk about suppression of our rights to free speech and our qualification as residents to question policy per the threat that she made against us by someone claiming to represent the HOA. I have reported her full name, place of business, a RE/MAX realtor, and the discussion to the Sheriff's Department. This community of townhomes offers very small driveways, enough for one vehicle only. Many residents, like us, utilize their garage for storage, water softener equipment, and so on, and therefore cannot park inside the equally tiny garage. Moreover, their limited guest spaces are near always unavailable. The bottom line is that this excessive parking policy seems to negatively impact the morale of the community, other than a few people who seem bothered by otherwise trivial matters. I've spoken with numerous neighbors who stated that their grief with this excessive driveway rule and would like to see it amended and relaxed. We spoke today with a neighbor on our street whose car was towed after only 20 minutes passed, unbeknownst to them, at a cost of $200. Why is a community spokesperson spreading disinformation? More importantly, why is the moderator spreading disinformation? The Sheriff's Department was quick to say that nearly all HOAs lie, playing good cop, bad cop, blaming their department for the HOA's often excessive and nonsensical policies set by a few Karens. In our case, the Sheriff's Department was not in agreement or support of her authoritative comments. In fact, the active LEO with whom I spoke stated that the sheriffs do not ticket and citation for such parking matters. In fact, they would ticket for a blocked fire hydrant, but even in that situation, the ticket would go to the owner of the vehicle and not the HOA, as misrepresented by the moderator. Additionally, their largest, most aggressive fine is $500, not $5,000 as stated by the moderator. They concluded stating, no one has the right to tow your vehicles, especially claiming that it's a county violation. And, most importantly, the Sheriff Department said the HOA cannot supersede county laws and ordinance. In the days that followed, the moderator of the private Facebook group threatened and carried out the threat to kick members from her own private group if they contribute to these horror stories. Moderators, especially those representing a community such as she, self-appointed, should remain unbiased and professional. Unfortunately, the contrary has occurred. Some examples of this ludicrous policy from our open to the public community roads serving as proof that the residents want and need to park this way, and in doing so does not whatsoever impede traffic. Yes, it may cause a small few people to experience hurt feelings and require safe space recuperation, but by no means were any county laws broken. Update from OP, replying to a comment that says, nothing stops you from starting an HOA Facebook page, unofficial also of course, and inviting your neighbors. OP says, that is precisely what occurred as a result of the mod's bullying bias. The mod is a self-professed volunteer, i.e. a neighborhood resident Karen, who demonstratively leverages her role as the private group's admin to bully residents, renters and owners alike, into submission by 1. Falsely blaming policy enforcement on the local sheriff's department, 2. Removing community members' right to question and or politely protest policy by blocking them from her private group and deleting their inquiries, and 3. Literally threatening and executing removal of her group's joined members, merely for joining a new public group that was created for the community's residents to openly and without bias share their concerns, insight, and so on. When we speak directly with neighbors, we have yet to meet a single one who agrees with the overreaching parking rules, such as one's vehicle and its entire chassis must sit 100% vertically over the driveway pavers or be fined and or towed. Neighbors have to play musical cars and or squeeze their vehicles into the equally small garage and driveway. Who designs a home with a single car driveway? The HOA's excessive policy only adds insult to injury. We respect laws. When they seem outside of logic and reason, they should be open to revisit. We should show zero respect towards bullies and keyboard cowards. Rules aren't meant to be permanent. Look at the world in which we live today, for example. Open, healthy debate is what makes America great, and precisely what a certain party is working overtime to remove from citizens. Shutting down free speech is exactly what the go-to is in this mess in the first place. We refuse to allow it to infiltrate our neighborhood and domicile. Karen boss desperately needed my uniform back the next day. No excuses. Posted by deleted. Okay, so a little backstory first. I'm a 20-year-old college student full-time, and I'm doing 23 plus hours a week on top of classes to make ends meet. I live paycheck to paycheck, and I have a car that I am and was paying off. I used to work in a McDonald's in my hometown, but since I moved to live on campus, which was 45 minutes away from my old job, I wasn't willing to make the commute. So I decided to apply and got accepted to a small sandwich shop 10 minutes from my college, which was a blessing. It started out great, plenty of hours, easy work, fast days, till the old manager decided to switch stores. The new manager was one of the biggest Karens you have ever met, like bad, and when I say bad, I really mean it. She completely changed the procedures and made things so much worse. And when I'd have to stay over sometimes 2 or 3 hours after closing, she'd burst in the next day yelling and screaming at the top of her lungs, "Stop staying later, you have to be out by 8:30 and we won't pay you for any time past then." I had no choice because the list that she gave me to do to close out the store alone every night, may I add, was extremely time consuming. Especially with no help, I was expected to stop serving at 8 and do 5 people's worth of work in 30 minutes. It simply wasn't doable. Hearing that I wasn't going to be paid for time that I worked, time I spent making sure everything was done on the list before I left, otherwise I'd be fired for not doing all of it, would go unpaid, as well as I'd be fired if I stayed longer than 8:30. There was no winning. On top of that, the moment management switched, they decided they were giving people too many hours and cut me only 3 hours a week. That went on for 4 weeks till I decided that enough was enough. $45 work weeks wasn't even worth putting in the time and effort to even show up. So, on one of my weekends, I was with my parents off campus. I was due to work that day. 3 hours, of course, my only day that week. I was shopping near said sandwich shop, it's located inside a Walmart, and my mom and I were discussing for the last week how should I just quit, since it seems like they're just trying to fire me without saying they're firing me, wanting me to leave on my own so they wouldn't need to fill out paperwork. Right then and there, I decided, know what? Screw this job, screw my entitled Karen boss. I sent her a text that I quit on the spot and to not expect me to come in that night for my shift. She texts me back ranting about how since I'm not giving her a 2-week notice, I'll never be able to work at one of those sandwich shops again. At that point, I didn't really even care. I had already give up my brand new car of only 4 months because I couldn't pay my loan and insurance. It was a nice car too, a white shimmery 2016 Hyundai Sonata. I love that thing. I told her at some point that week I tried to get the brand new uniform that, funny enough, they had just given to me the week prior, a whole 3.5 months after I started working there. But I warned her my classes run till right before closing. I didn't know when I'd be able to do so. She texts back in what I can only imagine the snarkiest tone possible. "No, I really need that uniform back tomorrow." I told her, well, I'm sorry, but that may not be possible due to my school schedule. I'm not willing to ditch a class to drop off a few pieces of clothing. She said, "No, you will bring it back tomorrow. Don't even try to lie to me. You were seen in store the day you quit. No excuses." Okay then, she said, no excuses. I didn't want to go into an argument with her over it. Well, and knowing that she herself would be closing that day and my classes ended at 8 exactly, well, I happily complied. I made sure that I'd arrive right as she was closing the lock on the gate. I was bringing the clothes in my reusable shopping bag. I had no throwaway bags, and since she can't take and claim my bag as her own, I was just going to give her the clothes one piece at a time. Knowing she would have to carry them out of the store, juggling them back home, made me happy. When it came time to deliver my uniform to her, all the stars seemed to align perfectly. I arrived at 8 30. Caught her on the way out with the outfit not even in a reusable bag to begin with. As an extra touch of sweet unplanned irony, it was raining outside. Hard rain. I mean, the sidewalks, I guess, were just extra slippery and muddy, because on my way in, I slipped and landed chest first into the mud. I was mostly spared, though, because the clothes were there to break my fall and absorb most of the filth. Dropping off the muddy, loose clothes, seeing her reaction, watching her stomp her feet, wrench in disgust, holding the clothes 10 feet away from her body, huff and puff and march out the store in pure shock and disbelief. She didn't even have words for me. It was the sweetest revenge that I had ever seen. This did mean, though, that I had to buy a whole new set of clothes and change in the Walmart bathroom, but it was all worth it to see her reaction in the end. After I had returned to my dorm that evening, I sent her a text saying simply, "Enjoy," and I blocked her number. Safe to say, karma really did pay out on my end. Security tells me no. Okay, it's no. Posted by Available Election 86. I work for a subsidiary of a Fortune 500 as a manager of a dev team. I have 7 people under me, think L3 people, very knowledgeable and driven to solve issues. We're all remote. I'm lucky my team is mostly great and we achieve the objectives we are given. One day, the new security manager decides that devs are not allowed to be administrators of their laptops. He writes a new company policy for it. It's a crap show for us. It means my team can't work on some applications that require administrative rights. Also, as devs know, some bugs need my guys to install and deinstall and reinstall the applications many times to make it work, changing only a few parameters each time. So I try to push back, saying that it might impact our service level agreements, but the security manager doesn't want to understand, and he just sends me emails with "No" in bold and caps. His boss is AFK, away from keyboard, for health reasons, so I can't escalate as I would have. The only way to make my guys work is that we need someone with the admin rights to unlock them when they need it. That admin is part of the support center. So, cue malicious compliance. I ask for my team to create a ticket each time. They're not happy about it, of course. The support center manager isn't happy either, because we create a lot of tickets and his team has been understaffed for a while. I also tell all the other managers in my department to do the same, and even though they create a lot less tickets than my team, it helps. Of course, this is my plan. If my team is unhappy, other people in the company are going to be too. So, pressure piles up. The support center manager is unhappy. His boss saw the numbers increase too, so he's unhappy too. He talks to my boss, but hey, I have emails from the security manager. The support center manager asked me to be reasonable and asked for a number of hours per week. I'm a team player, of course, so yes, I want to help him. I ask for 20 hours per week for a guy from his team to sit around waiting for my team to need him, unlock their install, and then wait some more. I'm guessing the admin is pretty happy about it because it's way less pressure than his normal job and there's not much to do but type in an admin password once in a while. It helps reduce, or not increase, the number of tickets, but the support center has less people, so they resolve less tickets than before. Then comes the climax. One application has a critical bug outside of the hours of the support center guy, so I tell them, as per my agreement with the support center manager and obeying the security manager, my team can't work on it yet. We'll have to wait until the next day. It's a healthcare product, so it means a lot of our customers are going to be upset about it. I can't say too much, I don't want to be found. Of course, since I'm a reasonable guy, the support center manager is too, so we find someone with admin rights and put my guys to work. The resolution of the ticket takes much longer than usual to solve because of all the back and forth between the admin and my team. During the post-mortem, it's found that the new security policy was the main delaying cause. Every member of my team told the post-mortem woman that, as I did. I have all the emails I sent to the security manager highlighting the risk of this new policy and him saying that he didn't care for it. I sent that to the post-mortem woman and let her find the way in the politics. 3 months later, the security manager doesn't work for us anymore, and most of my members of my team, but not all, have admin rights on their machine. I learned that the support center manager has made his mission in life to complain about the security manager to everyone who would listen and have him fired. And the support center manager knows a lot of people in the company. His director agreed with him, and with the post-mortem woman, or her boss, I'm not sure at this point, They convinced the VP to fire the security manager even before the security director came back from his health issue. HOA story time. I couldn't believe the audacity of HOA Karen. It all started when my family and I moved into our dream house in a quiet neighborhood. Our home was a vision of elegance, a little slice of suburban paradise. I could tell from the get-go that HOA Karen was eyeing our property with envy, and little did I know, that envy would soon turn into a full-blown feud. You see, HOA Karen, or as I like to call her, Queen of the Neighborhood, had an unhealthy obsession with power and control. She seemed to think that she was the unofficial ruler of our little community, and she wasn't shy about it. It was clear that she had a special relationship with the HOA president, and she wasn't afraid to use it to her advantage. The trouble began when we decided to spruce up our front yard with some beautiful landscaping. We added a quaint garden, a tasteful bird bath, and some charming yard decor. My family and I loved spending time in our garden, and it was our pride and joy. It was like HOA Karen's kryptonite. She couldn't stand the idea that our house might look better than hers. She started making a fuss about every little thing in the neighborhood. She'd complain about my next-door neighbor's wind chimes, about the color of another neighbor's mailbox, and she'd file complaint after complaint with the HOA for the tiniest infractions. But she saved her most venomous hatred for us and our garden. One sunny morning, I was sipping some coffee on the porch when I spotted her. HOA Karen was lurking near our garden, a sly grin on her face. She bent down, and before my eyes, she ripped up a patch of our beautiful flowers and crushed our Welcome to the Last Name family sign. My heart sank, and anger surged through me like an electric shock. I couldn't believe someone would stoop so low. Fortunately, we had installed security cameras all around the house, not only to protect our property, but also because something about HOA Karen's attitude had just set off alarm bells in my head. It was a good thing we did, because those cameras were about to become our saving grace. So when I reviewed the footage later that day, it was clear. There she was, HOA Karen just vandalizing our garden. I could not believe my luck. So I immediately called our lawyer. He happened to be a longtime family friend. So he saw the footage, and he just could not hide his excitement. We were going to take HOA Karen to court. Of course, HOA Karen's first move was to blame our sweet neighbor Sarah, name changed, for the damage. She claimed that Sarah had some vendetta against us and destroyed our garden. Sarah, bless her heart, was the nicest person you could ever meet, and we were good friends. I know Sarah wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone our garden. The lawsuit was on, and it was about to be heated. Our lawyer was a force to be reckoned with, and he'd put together an airtight case. He showed the footage, interviewed witnesses, and dug up a pile of other complaints against HOA Karen. It was clear that she was on a power trip, and her jealousy was driving her to ruin our lives. As the court date approached, I could feel the tension in the neighborhood. Word had gotten around, and it seemed like everyone had a story about HOA Karen's reign of terror. Even the HOA president was starting to distance himself from her. It was poetic justice at its finest. The day of the trial finally arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Our lawyer presented our case with precision and passion. He laid out all the evidence, showed the footage, and questioned the witnesses. It was a sight to behold, and I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of satisfaction as I watched HOA Karen just squirm over there in her seat. HOA's Karen defense, it was flimsy at best. She continued to point fingers at Sarah, despite all the evidence stacked against her. Her arrogance was on full display as she rambled on about her supposed innocence. It was clear to everyone in that courtroom that she had no leg to stand on. Finally, the verdict was in. The judge ruled in our favor, and HOA Karen was held responsible for vandalizing our property. She was ordered to pay for the damages as well as our legal fees, and it felt so amazing to finally get some justice after all this time. Watching HOA Karen's smug expression crumble was the sweetest victory. She had thought that she could rule the neighborhood with an iron fist, but justice had prevailed. her reputation was tarnished, and the neighborhood was finally free from her demands. When you're in a bind and you push through as hard as you can and you're hoping it works out and it finally does, doesn't it feel so good? What do you think? Entitled Crazy HOA President, posted by Snatch Biscuit. Just before leaving active duty military after almost 10 years, my wife and I bought a large house in my hometown on the coast in a nice neighborhood with an HOA. I'd never lived in an HOA before and never knew how bad and cliquey or political it could be. Not long after we moved in, the letters started about having a boat in our driveway. Mind you, we live not 100 yards from the water. Really? So we complied and placed it in the local marina. After living there about 2 years, the neighbors we had were really great. They moved, and then a new older couple moved in. They were really nice at first, letting my children swim in their pool, sharing an adult beverage in the evening, talking on the fence, and so on. And then it happened. The wife ran for and became the HOA president. She started walking around the neighborhood and taking notes. She would walk into people's yards and make corrections, and even go so far as to trespass into people's backyards, gated or not, and take pictures of violations and send out letters. I came home one evening to find her on my back porch looking at things and taking pictures. I was a police officer at the time, and while trying to be nice, I informed her that she could get into a lot of trouble for what she was doing. She tried to tell me, as the HOA president, she was entitled to go into people's private property and even their houses to inspect them if need be. I informed her of the state and the federal laws against this, and it started a war. I immediately started receiving $100 fines for very minor issues with my home. I had fixed the issues immediately and never had to pay the fines with the HOA property management company, but did file complaints. The HOA property management company never did anything about the complaints. And then it happened. I also owned a small business which I had a truck and trailer that I would use during the business day. I had this parked in front of the house one day, and she took a picture of it. According to the HOA rules, it was not allowed to be there overnight, and it never was. I received a letter and a fine for $100, stating that the vehicle had been parked there overnight. This time, I asked for a review with the HOA board of directors, the PM company, the attorney, and my attorney. This was going to cost the HOA, the PM company, and all involved much, much more than the $100 in time and money. At this meeting, I asked the HOA president to present evidence other than one picture that the vehicle was there more than 24 hours with time and date stamps. She could not. I then asked for the $100 to be dropped. The HOA board and the PM company refused. I was publicly berated by the HOA president in front of the board and my attorney, saying that I should be a good soldier and do as I was told by the HOA board and obey the rules. At this point, my attorney and I had had enough evidence of harassment due to the recording of the conversation. We then informed everyone in the room that we had been recording everyone. This inflamed them more, and they threatened to call the police for violating the law. In our state, it was more than legal and well within our rights. We then informed them that we would be filing a lawsuit which was sure to win and it would bankrupt the HOA. According to state law and the HOA bylaws, in the event that the HOA ceased to exist or became bankrupt, each and every one of the 35 houses in the HOA would have their mortgages immediately due and payable. Most people don't know this exists in a lot of HOA covenants. We just got up and we walked out of the meeting and said we think this settles the matter and hope that there will be no further fines, threats, harassment, and so on. I had very good friends in the neighborhood and did not want to see their families affected. About a month later, the HOA had elections for a new HOA board. I informed several people in the neighborhood that I would be running for the HOA board president. We got together, and on the night of the board meeting and the election, we attended, and there were only about 10 people there to vote. There were 6 people, along with myself, who voted for me, but miraculously, the incumbent HOA president had a unanimous vote when the property management company chair counted the votes. Right there, in the meeting, I asked all 6 people who voted for me and to raise their hand. With me, that was 7, and the PM chair had no answer since it already had been entered into the corporate minutes. I said it would be fine, let it stand, and then informed everyone in the room about the previous meeting, the mortgages, suing the HOA, and now calling the state attorney general's office. Within a short time, the property management company was changed out, the HOA president was replaced with a nice level-headed gentleman, and I never, ever so much as heard a peep from the HOA ever again. I played by the rules, more or less, but eventually sold the house and moved on. Never mess with a paratrooper. HOA Boat Issues by Matt Reston. After moving into our new home in a subdivision with a homeowner association, I received a call from my wife while at work. She informed me that we had just been visited by a contingent of officers of our HOA. She further told me that they were going to make us move our fence. For the backstory, when initially looking at the model home, I asked for and received a copy of the HOA covenants, and I read them cover to cover. I was particularly interested in whether or not homeowners were permitted to have boats on their property. I found that boats were permitted as long as they could not be seen from the street. I agreed to purchase the home if the builder would pour a concrete boat pad beside the garage, thinking that I could put up gates in front of the pad blocking the view from the street. The builder agreed and we purchased the home. When I arrived home, I asked my wife what happened and was informed of the following. 3 HOA officers visited and were informed that I was at work. They congratulated her on a beautiful home, but mentioned that we would have to move the gates as they were forward of the middle of the house and the fences are not permitted in the front yard, per the HOA covenants. They then said, "Your husband is the fishing guide, isn't he?" When she replied yes, he said that they all like to fish and he was sure that something could be worked out, and they left. I called the number that was provided and one of these gentlemen answered. I said that my wife had told me that they visited and what they had said. I told them that I would be happy to take them fishing. All we had to do was to come up with an agreeable date, and of course, my fee was $400 per day. He replied, "I don't think you understand." And I said that I do understand it perfectly. I then said that you may be able to force me to move my gates, but let me tell you what will happen if you do. I will head out to the farming area and find the rustiest, beat-up piece of crap automobile that I can find, park it in my driveway, and put a 9-foot satellite antenna on the roof of the car, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. Read your covenants. I then hung up. I never heard another word from them.
My 15-year-old niece keeps giving me a snobby attitude and won't stop complaining about everything. Nothing is good enough for her, and it's going to be a very long 2 weeks. Posted by Incredible Way 4826. My niece is staying with me until September 18th because her parents left for their vacation to Reykjavik yesterday. She flew in from San Diego yesterday morning, and it's been nothing but heck. I live in Colorado, by the way. She keeps non-stop complaining about how cold it is here, as if I have any control of the weather. When she first got to my house, she said, "Do I really have to stay in this?" before even entering. I live in a townhouse. She was upset there's no pool and was like, "Why don't you have a pool?" Look, I know you're poor, but everyone should have a pool. My car isn't as nice as her parents' cars, and she keeps complaining how run down it is, and she's scared it's going to fall apart. I drive a 2016 Honda Accord. There's nothing wrong with it. It's kept clean. Her dad drives an Audi, and her stepmom drives a Maserati. She also keeps making videos around my house laughing at all my furniture, the way the house looks, my car, and so on. She asked if I got my furniture at IKEA because it looks cheap and laughed. She's complaining because there's carpet throughout the house, and only poor people have that, and the bathrooms have tile floors and not marble, and that she has to shower in a tub shower with a shower curtain. At her house, it's a stand-up shower with marble walls, and there's a glass door. I don't have stand-up showers. She's also mad there's no sauna in the bathroom. She said straight to my face, "I can't believe I have to stay in this piece of crap until my parents get back," and then walked outside and slammed the door and was texting someone, probably her dad. She's very close to him. As of today, my guest bedroom already has stuff out everywhere. The blankets I'd originally had on the bed, along with the pillows, got thrown into the hallway and replaced with ones she brought. She has clothes all over the floor. She has a few dishes with half-eaten food sitting on the floor, and I told her yesterday no eating or drinking upstairs. She's using the dresser as a vanity and left all of her makeup and used makeup wipes out everywhere. She said, "If I want the room clean, I can do it myself or hire a maid." And then she laughed and said, "Oh wait, I forgot you're too poor for that." I ordered takeout last night from a local restaurant, and she made fun of the menu because the prices were cheap. $25 for a burger is cheap? And she got the $80 filet mignon dinner and threw most of it out because it tasted weird and she's not that hungry. Her dad sent me $650 to feed her and take her to do whatever, so that came from that money. Today, we went to eat at Outback Steakhouse for lunch, and she refused to eat any of her food. She said it looked weird. She said her dad would never take her to a dump like this restaurant. Then she kept complaining that she was hungry after we left, and that I'm a terrible person for making her starve and wasting her time making her sit there. We also went furniture shopping because her dad wants to buy her a new bedroom set for her 16th birthday next month, along with her trip to Hawaii. She's being very picky, and he wanted me to check out the prices of places around here, see if she likes anything, and get back to him on it. He said that she has a budget of $8,000 total for her bedroom. She wants either these upholster princess bed frames or these mirror bed frames, which are pricey. It's around $3,000 to $5,000 for the ones that she likes, and that's just for the bed frame by itself. She also wants a vanity, a bench, nightstand, chandelier, and a dresser with it, and have it all match the bed. I tried showing her the cheaper options, and she screamed at me in the store that I have no taste and that it's her bedroom furniture to stay the F out of it. She told me to go back to the car and wait because I'm annoying her. I was about ready to leave her there, honestly. She then wanted to go clothes shopping and knows her dad sent me money. I said, "You can go get an outfit," meaning one. "You still need food from the grocery store." She was not happy about that and told me to stop being a cheap witch with her dad's money. She was adamant about getting this one dress and a pair of heels that was $230. That's less money she has to spend on groceries and other fun things. She knows this and still went with the purchase. She wanted me to buy food for her from Whole Foods and use some of my money if I run out of money her dad gave. I was going to buy her own groceries because she's a very picky eater. I suggested a local grocery store because it's cheaper and she can get more food. She started swearing at me and calling me names, so we went home instead. She ignored me the rest of the car ride and was texting someone. She got out of the car and started crying, saying she misses her dad and she hates me. She hates my house. It's so embarrassing and trashy. She wishes she could be on vacation with her dad, and it's not fair she has to stay with me, and then she ran into the house crying. She keeps yelling at me to F off and stop talking to her, to go get hit by a car, that I'm annoying, go away, and blah blah, whenever I say anything to her. I was eating a sandwich earlier, around almost 4 p.m., and she came downstairs and said, "Nice to see you feed your fat face while I starve. You're such a selfish witch, you know that I hope you choke one in and die," and rolled her eyes and went back upstairs. I ordered pizza for dinner, and she started crying at the table that she misses her dad. I asked if she called him and talked to him today, and she said in a rude tone, "What do you think?" and rolled her eyes. Then she was complaining about how gross the pizza was and got up and took the box and threw it in the garbage. She then told me to go to a gym and lose weight and that I'm fat and disgusting and went outside. She also just took a super long shower and said she's going to keep doing it every day since it's so cold here, and if I don't like it, tough, because she doesn't like being cold or being here. She swore at me for not turning on the heat in the house. It's not cold enough to turn the heat on, in my opinion. I usually don't start doing that until the end of October, beginning of November, when the highs are only in the 50s. Whew, it's going to be a very long 2 weeks. She goes to a private school, and they're doing online school again this year. Her first day is September 7th, and she's already telling me that I can't force her to log in and do her schoolwork, that she doesn't care about it. She's right, I can't. But I don't want to be blamed for her being tardy. I know her dad will be pretty ticked since he's paying for her to go there. Entitled parent demands a 50% discount after a very minor inconvenience. Posted by Zulva AZ. Before I start, I want to preface and say that I have high-functioning ASD, which is autism. Some of my social skills are limited, but I try to work my way around it and being as social as I can. So that's why you don't see a lot of conversation in this post compared to my prior post here. That, and my work surprisingly doesn't have many Karens running around given our location. We're smack dab in the middle of a retirement community, but we're the only store for the western side of my state. I thought my entitled parent stories would end with my now prior neighbor, but alas, entitlement has hit my work. I work for a hardware store in the U.S. as what they call a customer sales associate. I'm one of 6 CSAs who are tasked to work in our paint department within the days. Out of those 6, I volunteered to do closing hours. I'm a night owl, so I usually don't wake up till around 1 or 2 p.m. Tonight was a quiet night for me and the closer for our sister department until I had 2 women, who I can assume are mother and daughter, approach my paint desk with some very worried and irritated expressions. I walk by and ask how they're doing and what I can help them with. The mother, mid-60s, explained that she returned her paint due to it having the consistency of jelly. I get confused and I grab the can from our return to manufacturer cart so I can examine and try to diagnose it. Lo and behold, they were right. It was like jelly. I asked them the usual questions about storage and use, and I saw no clues in how it could have reached this state in their home. I then referenced about our freight and how sometimes stuff like this happens. I explained to them that I will remake the paint and even discount it with the manager being notified. As I'm toiling through the list of assistant managers and department supervisors on the radio apps for the inventory phones, one of my assistant managers walks by with his lunch and dinner, and I catch him and ask if he could spare 5 seconds to look at the paint to confirm a discount. He says sure, and examines the paint as I'm citing why it was returned and the customers who wanted it replaced. He said to discount it by 20%, which is huge given we only discount paint by $2 to $5 depending on the issue. This $40 paint was now $31, but I decided to reduce it to $30 to round it out. Fast forward, the 2 arrive and I have this conversation. The mother is the entitled parent. Is it ready? Yep, it is. I spoke to my manager and I told them about the paint and they said to discount it by 20%, but I decided to discount you a little more. You mean to tell me that you discounted by 20% because of my troubles? This is ridiculous and you know it. I'm sorry, but I'm following what my manager had ordered me to do. How old are you? 21. I'm in my 60s, and you think you would have discounted me to 50% because I had to paint it? It was clear she didn't, as she may have likely hired someone to do it, but either way it was a frustrating moment. Unfortunately, no ma'am, though I'm terribly sorry about the issue with your old can, but I will not discount it further as my manager had requested me to discount it by 20%, and I even gave you a little more than 20%. The entitled parent is then ticked and asked to speak to our manager that discounted it. I explained that he's out to lunch and is the only one to know in our department very well. She asked if I could interrupt him, and I also said no because of company policy. She then asked for a list of all the managers, and it was at this point that I put my foot down and said no. They then walked off to check out, swearing to call a manager. After that, I went over to customer service with the old can to return it. A good friend of mine for customer service actually asked me about the 2 women, and I explained to her my side of the story. She said she also had an interaction with that entitled parent prior to her coming over to my paint desk.
Neighbor committed arson on my property and police are not recommending charges. What can I do? Posted by Annoyed Catfish. We're in Texas, outside of city limits. This situation is complicated due to ongoing harassment. I'll try to add enough context for background leading up to the actual event and how the county sheriff's office has responded. Our neighbor has been harassing us for years. We've repeatedly asked them not to contact us and filed multiple police reports on recommendation from our lawyer to document his harassment, resulting in the sheriff's office telling us that it's a civil matter and not criminal, so there was nothing they could do. About a year ago, we filed a civil lawsuit for harassment with hours of video footage. The list includes stalking, defamation, threatening to kill our dogs, conspiring with someone to file a false report in which they stated I was screaming I wanted to off myself after receiving text messages stating I needed to off myself, and much, much more. We have moved due to the last incident, which put us in fear for our lives and prompted the lawsuit due to the sheriff's utter lack of an investigation. 2 months ago, our neighbor came onto our property, which is a vacant lot adjacent to our home, and he cut down the majority of the trees and then set fire to them. We only noticed after the fire reached above the tree line, and the fire department had to respond. We have everything on video. When the sheriff responded, our neighbor lied to the officer, stating that he was the caretaker. At first, the officer was dismissive and thought it was a misunderstanding on our part. Then, after the sheriff left the scene, our neighbor texted us that we needed to talk about maintaining our land for the community. So, when the officer called us, we showed him the text and the video footage. We explained that we have a criminal trespass warning against him and that he has never been the caretaker. They said they would recommend a warrant for arson, specifically because he lied to the responding officer. 2 months go by, and the case is still unassigned. We've called multiple times a week, and nothing has happened. Yesterday, we finally got a detective assigned, and they told us this was a neighbor squabble and would not recommend charges to the DA. We are beyond frustrated at this point. We have the civil lawsuit, in which we're now seeking additional damages for the arson, but how do we prevent our neighbor from causing any additional damage or committing criminal acts against us, since the sheriff's office refuses to do anything? Can we contact the DA? Should we go to news stations to draw attention to the sheriff's negligence in investigating the crime? We are in desperate need of help and advice. I have a call scheduled with our lawyer, but I'm trying to understand our rights and if there's any recourse. Do you think OP should lawyer up for this one? Am I just overreacting? Posted by Queen of Semaine. I've been living in a duplex with my husband and mother for a few years now. For the past 3 years or so, the neighbor in the next unit has been disrespectful toward us. All because she believes we are Hispanic, even though we have said that we are Italian. I mean, even if we were Hispanic, it doesn't give you the right to be disrespectful. She's also verbally harassed my landlord. She never pays her rent on time, doesn't answer the landlord's messages. I know this because my landlord has told me, yet her lease keeps getting renewed. She cursed at me once for leaving my car in the end of the driveway to unload groceries so I can bring them from the front. I had to call the cops on her once over a stupid incident that I apologized for profusely, and when my mother spoke to her, mentioned my late brother had passed away recently, she said she didn't give an F that he died. I can't even park my car in the driveway during the winter as she takes up the entire space and doesn't move back much closer to the garage that the landlord gave her permission to use. Even though we were the first tenants, so I have been on edge every winter night when the ban takes place, worrying if I'll get ticketed. I understand children are children, but now that they're home for the summer, they're in and out numerous times of the day. Not that it's a problem, but it is a problem when they slam the doors so hard to go out and in from the front that our walls rattle and sometimes makes the stuff that we have on them fall. Not once have I heard her scold them at all. She lets them out until 9 p.m. at night, not even checking on where they are. They are at least 5 and 7 years old. It's just a huge mess. I was wondering if I'm being overreacting, or do I have the right to be upset that our living situation is terrible with these people? Next year, we're planning on moving out, but for now, we're just stuck here. This commenter asks OP and gets an answer. Yes, move as soon as you can. Be sure to tell the landlord that the fact that the neighbor's allowed to continue harassing and bothering you is the reason you will not renew your lease. OP replies, we're staying here for 1 more year as our lease was renewed a couple of months ago, but a few months before it's up, we're finding a new place to stay and then to just do that. She once told me she wouldn't renew their lease due to other issues, but since she is more concerned about losing any income, she keeps renewing theirs. Would you file a police report if neighbors stole your package? Posted by 888 Christie. Basically the title. See, I've been trying to pick and choose my battles because I learned issues with neighbors usually escalate quickly, considering people can't take any criticism or they're on drugs around here. I know my meth head neighbors stole my package because I ordered very distinct beach pattern couch covers that were delivered on June the 30th. I couldn't find my package anywhere. Well, I thought about texting the landlord to check the cameras for June the 30th, but I never did. And then today, as I'm walking to my car, my neighbor's windows has one of the blinds open for once, and my distinct covers are over the bed in the room. I also don't like that these neighbors have my full real name now from the stolen package. These neighbors are the definition of meth heads, with cardboard in front of their front windows. This was a ground level side window that I have to pass to get to my car, and I decided to not knock on the door mad because I heard this man screaming at his wife before, and he looks like he's 50 and always high and drunk. He never has a shirt on, pants sagging with half of his butt out, and is just gross to be near in general. The craziest part is, this apartment building is 10 feet from campus dorms and basically on my college campus. But due to the decrease of enrollment in the last 2 or 3 years, landlords have been renting student housing to literally anyone. Would the police charge them just based off the pictures of the covers through their window? They could also pull up the camera from June 30th. There's video in the mailroom and facing my door. The landlord said he's working on getting it. He also called that neighbor to pretend that he had to look at an old fireplace in there, and the neighbor answered the landlord's call. "Who the frick is this? What the frick do you want?" And my landlord said he saw both covers when he went in there and said that he liked them and asked where I got it. Are you ready for this insane Karen who breaks the law internationally and thinks she can't get caught? This is called Too Racist to Enjoy a Tropical Island and Ends Up Paying the Price. Posted by Fish Flavored Candles. Nice name. I was just reminiscing about the absurdity of the situation that happened almost 2 years ago, and I've decided it's too good not to share. I'll be honest, it involves a lot of legal stuff that I'm not sure I'm talking about 100% correctly, but I can assure you this story is true, as is the end result. This might be a long one, so buckle up. For context, my mom is a traveling healthcare worker, not a nurse nor a doctor, just to clarify, and we're from the US. Usually, her contracts last from 8 weeks to 9 months, and she's worked all around the States. This results in an ungodly amount of airline miles that she likes to gift me so I can visit her whenever she's on contract. I get a nice vacation, she gets to see me, and I get to see her. Win-win-win. 2 years ago, after I graduated and was living at my mom and her long-term boyfriend's house in a COVID lockdown-induced depression and existential crisis, my mother scored her first overseas contract on a tropical island for 6 months, from June to the end of November. I'd gotten a crappy job in my hometown to start saving for whatever my next step was. 3 months in, my mom realized the downside to being on a very small island where international travel to and fro was a pain in the butt. She was lonely. This prompted a very bashful phone call in which she asked me if I wanted to take a break from working and come stay with her for a while. I jumped at the opportunity and we made arrangements to get my passport renewed, and we booked a ticket for me to stay with her for the last few months of her contract. All of this context comes to the main character, another US-based traveler, also not a nurse nor a doctor, who was my mother's coworker. Let's call her Mary. Mary, to put it bluntly, was racist as heck, and she was not enjoying getting paid to work on an island with crystal blue water on white sand beaches. Why? Because she failed to realize that she wouldn't be treating elite white resort goers. Nah. Turns out, the people who tend to be treated at the local hospital were the native islanders. You know, the people of color. She was also a COVID denier, Trumper, and an anti-vaxxer. Really just a blast to talk to. Sarcasm. She was so livid about having to go to a grocery shop surrounded by POC, not what she called them. Hint, it's a pretty bad word, I do not say it. It didn't matter that she could go to the beach every day after work and was lodged in a multi-million-dollar vacation home on one of the highest points of the island with a gorgeous view. Nah, she was too busy recoiling at the sight of melanin. So yeah, she hated being there and wanted nothing more than just to leave. She latched onto my mother for company, and my mother reluctantly obliged her for a time due to the aforementioned loneliness. The main conflict of the story comes when my mother's contract had begun to reach its end, while Mary still had a month to go. Mary fought tooth and nail to renegotiate an early end to her contract, but was denied. So what does she do? She just leaves. Like just packs all of her stuff and departs to the US anyway. No biggie, right? She just doesn't get her remaining paychecks? Wrong. Here comes the beauty of contracts. See, the contract she agreed to comped her lodging on the condition that she fulfill her employment duties. Since she very clearly had no intention to, the contract was therefore voided and the compensation for her lodging was promptly retracted. She was now on the hook to pay back this country's health ministry for the several months of rent they had paid to house her in that gorgeous vacation home with a beautiful view. I'm not sure how much it would have been, but I'm guessing $1 million at the very least. Mary was now not only a crap employee in this country, but a literal fugitive. But she figured they could only arrest her and charge her if she ever stepped foot back on their soil, so she wasn't concerned. She was mostly right, but that wasn't the only thing this country's government could do. They proceeded to ring up the good old US government, notify them of the charges, and let them take it from there. They couldn't have her extradited, but they could ask the US to flag her passport until she paid them or faced charges. So the US government said, "Sure, buddy, we'll do it." And they did. Mary can't leave the US anymore. She can't even go to Canada. She tried to join her friends on vacation in Mexico, but wouldn't be allowed to cross the border. So if you ever think you screwed up a job really badly, just remember that you at least aren't an actual international criminal who can no longer leave the country. I'm not sure why her racist butt even wanted to go to Mexico. I heard there's a lot of Mexican people there.
You won't settle until I send a file type your computer will open? Okay, posted by Meowschwitz in there. Client comes in with a seemingly simple auto collision. Client was hit, other driver got out and said something like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm so sorry, I dropped my phone and I reached to get it." Client had a dash cam which recorded the whole thing, including the admission of guilt. Easy client, right? Turns out the admission was really important because the type of accident didn't make a determination of fault easy. Imagine a rear-end collision at a red light as an easy determination, but a collision at a four-way stop sign as a hard determination. When the cops showed up, the police report found both drivers at fault and did not mention any statements from the other driver. But we have our admission and my client's damages were above the other guy's policy limit, so I send a demand to the insurance company for policy limits. Note that the insurance company has an obligation to negotiate in good faith, which becomes important later. Lawyer from insurance reaches out and says, basically, "Look, my client says they were driving safely and the police report says shared fault. The initial offer is like 10 grand. I replied, "Yeah, but my client had a dash cam and it recorded your client admitting fault." It's important to understand that this was before dash cams were common. It wasn't my first case with a dash cam, but it might have been my third or fourth. No mention of the dash cam was made on the police report. Insurance attorney says, I imagine while twirling a dumb mustache, "Interesting, can you send me a copy of the video?" I said sure and send it over. He replies, "I can't open this." So I send him a link to VLC Media Player. It's a weird extension and Windows Media Player won't play it, but VLC will. Just follow the installer instructions and it should play, no problem. He says, "I'm not installing something to watch your alleged dashcam video. Send me a file I can play if you want me to consider it." This makes me unhappy, but I tried again. It will take less than a few minutes to install. You can watch the video and listen to your client admit fault. He says, "We're done here until you send something that I can play." Cue malicious compliance music, country grammar. Start super cool montage of me going through other client files. Stop montage as I open a file and my face is bathed in a golden light radiating from an old Memorex CD. So I found a different dashcam video which did not contain any sound, but it could be played with a Windows Media. So I found a different dashcam video which did not contain any sound, but it could be played through Windows Media Player, and it was close enough to my current client's facts that if you weren't paying attention, it could pass. Other attorney just asked for a file he could play, right? I sent it over. He says, "Wow, no sound. Guess you're done, buddy." So I sued. During discovery, I sent a CD over which included the original video and a copy of VLC. He must have ignored it because he didn't say anything about it. During a pre-trial motion hearing, I played the video for the judge. The judge might have heard the other lawyer's jaw hit his desk. The insurance attorney says, "Your Honor, this is not the video he sent to me." In my mind's eye, I see the malicious compliance Death Star preparing to fire. "Judge, I thought he might say that. Here's a copy of our emails where I described the video, provided the video, and sent instructions on how to play it. Here is a copy of the CD I sent with Discovery, which also has a video and a copy of VLC. Finally, here is a copy of the unrelated video which I sent to fulfill his request of something he could play." Other attorney asked for a recess. Because he refused the initial demand of policy limits I told him, I would argue that he did not negotiate in good faith. We settled for well above the policy limits. Client was very happy. P.S. Don't go to law school. #not worth.
HOA Karen and President story time. I was stunned. My old work truck, parked in my driveway, was gone. I blinked a few times, thinking that perhaps my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, my beloved truck was unmistakably absent. Fuming with anger and confusion, I quickly called the local towing company, fearing that my truck had been stolen. To my surprise, they informed me that my vehicle had been towed due to a complaint from the infamous HOA Karen, as the neighbors, they had just loved her, affectionately called her. I couldn't believe it. I was parked on my property on my driveway, and there was no conceivable way I was infringing on anyone else's space. The wheels of justice began to turn in my head, and I knew I had to confront HOA Karen about her unjust actions. I stormed over to her house, ready to give her a piece of my mind. Her perfectly manicured lawn and pristine white picket fence were the epitome of suburban perfection. I took a deep breath and I rang her doorbell. A few moments later, the door swung open, and there she stood, HOA Karen in all her glory. "What do you want?" she sneered, her eyes scanning me with disdain. "I want to know why you had my truck towed," I replied, and struggled to maintain my composure. She crossed her arms and said, "Because it was parked on my property, that's why. You can't just go around parking wherever you please." I clenched my fist and I felt that anger surge within me. "That's my property, Karen, my driveway. I wasn't blocking your access to your house or yard. I'm parked on my own land." HOA Karen's smug expression wavered for a moment, but she quickly regained composure. "Well, it doesn't look like it to me. I'll be contacting the HOA president about this." And so she did. A few days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox threatening a fine from the HOA if I didn't remove my truck from the illegally parked spot. I knew I had to fight this injustice, so I contacted my lawyer and we started preparing a case to prove my ownership of the parking spot. But HOA Karen wasn't done. She spread lies about me, claiming I was a troublemaker who didn't respect the rules of the neighborhood. The HOA president, who hadn't met me yet, was inclined to believe her and sent me a notice demanding I pay a fine. What? I was ticked. I decided it was time to take this battle to the next level, so I just sued the HOA for their false accusations and harassment. It wasn't long before the case reached the courtroom, where my lawyer presented the evidence of my property lines and the rightful parking space. The truth was on my side, not hers. The courtroom drama seemed to drag on forever, but in the end, justice prevailed. The judge ruled in my favor, and HOA Karen's lies were exposed. It turned out that she'd been exaggerating the issue for her own twisted pleasure, using me as a scapegoat to create chaos in the community. When the HOA president discovered the truth, he was shocked and disgusted at the HOA Karen's deceit. He decided to fine her for her false allegations, causing her to be slapped with a hefty penalty. She had to pay up from the lawsuit damages and the fines. Unable to bear the shame and financial burden, HOA Karen decided to sell her house and move out of the neighborhood. It was a bittersweet victory for me, but at least the nightmare of HOA Karen's reign of terror was over. As I stood in my driveway, watching her moving truck pull away for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The neighborhood had been rid of HOA Karen, and I could finally park my truck in peace on my own property, as I had always should have been able to do. Woohoo! Have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen? Let me know. You want the house? Okay, good luck at the renovation. Posted by Throwaway 1914-07. This happened in the year 2015. This is the long story short of the already long story. My grandmother on my father's side died in 2007, bless her soul. She owned a house and a lot of bungalow type stuff near the sea. Now, this house wasn't paid in full, and there's still a remaining balance of about $5,200 in US dollars, which this is already big money for us. Because my father is the only son, his older sisters agreed that he should get the house. There was no will, but he should pay the remaining balance. We lived there and we renovated the house. Well, my father did almost 75% of the work. He added 2 bedrooms, he did a ceiling and furniture, he even added another bathroom and tiled the floors, kitchen sink and septic tank. There was no drainage system on that location. So basically, we received the house in bare shape. We paid fully in 2015, but we didn't receive the title. There was just so many excuses. 2016 comes. His nephew is a retired commander, and he visited my parents and told my father that he wants to add a 2nd floor so he and his wife could live there also. My father didn't agree, and he called his older sister if they want that to happen. They just said that they don't want to get involved. His nephew showed him that he already had the title of the house. Don't know how he did that. Maybe he used his political background. I'm not sure. So my father was furious. He called me and told me what had happened. By that time, I had already bought a small patch of land for them when they want to retire, but I'm still saving enough money to build a house suitable for their needs. There were court battles that I will not include, but in the end, his nephew won. But there was an agreement that he has to pay my father $7,400. He mailed us the contract that we should vacate the house after 6 months, and there was a specific item that our lawyer pointed out. A, we should repaint the house, no specific color, and B, leave the house in the original state. Guess what? We hired a construction team to demolish the bedroom, the bathroom, remove the ceiling, the kitchen sink, tiled floor, and also the septic tank, leaving it in the original state. We spent about $2,800 including the labor. The cherry on top, we painted the house with black inside and red outside with violet dots. It was a huge eyesore. I was bombarded with lots of calls and messages from my aunts and cousin, which I did not reply. We went no contact after that. My parents now live in a beautiful farmhouse, tending their small garden. They enjoy morning walks by the lake, just living a stress-free environment. They're planning to adopt a puppy next month. Maybe you're wondering if $5,000 is a small amount of money. I didn't include that the title was pawned to someone, not a family member. We got our money back because we have receipts proving that we paid the remaining balance. I think this is late, but I think I had made errors in computing our currency into dollar. The judge ruled that, besides the remaining balance that we had paid, we should also get paid with the renovation expense. Karen doesn't like people parking in front of her house, posted by the Fallen Polish. So when I was around 6 years old, I lived with my family in a nice house in a small city in Poland. It was a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts, and pretty much all the neighbors knew each other. There were no sidewalks around the part of the street that I lived at, only one crappy sidewalk that started on the other side in front of my neighbor's house. It's important to remember that the sidewalk was very old and in bad shape. Still, to this day, people are asking the city to fix it. This story is about that neighbor, Karen. She was an older lady, and everyone suspected that she really didn't have anything better to do than gather gossip and disturb everyone trying to rule the street. Everyone was commenting that if you wanted to get the whole area to know something, you had to tell her that message as a secret. Whenever someone came to visit us, they usually parked their car in front of our property. But on bigger meetups, like barbecues or parties, people would park in front of our closest neighbors' houses too. That never was a problem. No gates were obstructed and no one was disturbed. Well, almost. Karen hated when someone parked in front of her house. She would always run out yelling about, "How dare you park your filthy cars on my precious sidewalk?" My mother is not someone that lets someone yell at her. She had many discussions with Karen about the laws and rules that stated that she doesn't own anything outside of her fence, which means that the sidewalk is public and anyone can park on it as long as they leave enough space for a wheelchair to pass. That wasn't enough. Every time someone would come to us and park their car there, the yelling would start. Until one time when my mother's friend, Tomek, came for a coffee during winter. He's a local policeman and his specialty is road law. So my mother tells him about Karen and her behavior regarding the sidewalk. Tomek laughs since that thing was in such bad shape that it can barely even be called a sidewalk. When he was leaving, he assured my mom that he would step by next day for coffee on his lunch break. The next day comes by, and I was playing with my brother in the snow. We see a black car pulling over in front of Karen's house, and as the driver gets out, Karen storms out of her house yelling, "You can't park here. This is my sidewalk. Get your filthy car off my prop." Well, there he was, Tomek, with his full uniform, hat and all, turning around towards Karen as comically as he could. "Excuse me? You tell me that I can't park my car here?" Yes. "But this is a sidewalk open to the public." "Yes, this is my sidewalk." "So, let me get this right. This is your sidewalk?" "Yes." "And you are the one responsible for taking care of it?" Proudly, Karen replies, "Well, yes, I am. That's why I don't allow anyone to park here." "Oh, that's so nice that I found you. Since it's your sidewalk, you are responsible for clearing the snow from it to not create danger for the people walking on it. Since it was not plowed, I need to write you a fine for endangering public safety," he says as he pulls out his notebook. "But no other sidewalks are plowed." "Oh, it doesn't matter. The other sidewalks belong to the city. The clearing crew is working on cleaning them. But since this sidewalk is yours, it is your responsibility." "But I'm old. I can't shovel the snow." "Then you need to hire someone to do that. Of course, if this sidewalk happened to be of public property..." Yeah, it's not mine." "No." "But a moment ago you were yelling at me that it was. So what is it? Is it yours or not? Because I don't know if I should fine you now." "No, it's not mine." "All right, seems we've cleared that up. Now, if you ever harass anyone like you did with me, it could result in a fine. So, I recommend you watching out on what you claim to be yours." And then he proceeded to cross the street and enjoy a coffee in our house. Karen never disturbed anyone for parking in front of her house again. She would only stare at people trying to burn holes in their skulls with her sight. "Investor wants to buy my house way over market value. Sure, no problem." Posted by DodoHead974. Background: my parents and their neighbor bought homes in an up-and-coming part of Florida 20 years ago. We're talking half-acre lots with 2,500 square foot homes for like 130 grand. Our neighbor's home was a little smaller than my parents', no pool, and over the 20 years, the only thing done to the house was a new roof. Nothing else had been changed. Everything was still the original: appliances, the paint, the AC unit, cabinets, tile, and carpet. I wish I could say that she took care of it and never needed to change things, but that wasn't the case. Or neighbor's house looked 20 years old. Well, she is a widow, and the house is huge for just her, so she decided to sell and take advantage of the market. She listed it for $400,000. Despite never having put a penny into it, the house goes onto a bidding war, and the top bidder is an investor from California. She offers to pay $30,000 over asking, pay the closing cost, and can do it the same day. Cue malicious compliance. The investor woman had two stipulations. Our neighbor takes the house off the market immediately, and she turns over the key to her management company with the cash for the home held in escrow until the key was turned over and our neighbor's side of the paperwork done. Now, our neighbor was upfront with this woman and the state of her home and asked if she wanted to have her management company come to look at it first. The woman says, "No, I'm renting the house and it doesn't need to be painted, just pull it off the market." This woman essentially bought the home for about $450,000 when it was all said and done. So our neighbor immediately goes to the management company office with her realtor, signs the paperwork, hands over the key, and gets the check for the home. A few days later, our neighbor gets a call from the investor lady. She is irate. The house is in disarray. It needs a paint job ASAP, new appliances and flooring at the least. She demands that our neighbor paint the house. She won't take ownership of the home until that is done, to which our neighbor responds to her, "It's not my home anymore. It was signed over to you, and that check handed to me and cleared. That house is no longer my problem. Enjoy." This story all came about because yesterday my parents called our old neighbor. There was a for sale sign on the house again, and we were confused. Our old neighbor promptly showed up and told us the story, and we are all laughing hysterically because the woman has it listed for $430,000, which anyone with eyes to tour it would never pay. And even if she did get it, she'd still be losing a crap ton of money. Who doesn't love a story when greedy investors trying to inflate the market lose and lose big? This crazy Karen story is called Ignore the Red Lights and Cones at Your Peril, posted by 7dory Native. About a decade ago, while I was waiting for my current department to hire, I took a job with a private EMS company as an EMTI on a fast response motorcycle unit, contracted out to our local freeway agency for accident response. It was an okay gig. Long hours and riding 300 plus kilometers every day killed my love of biking, but it beat the heck out of working on an ambulance. The same agency also staffed pickups with safety crews for the purpose of lane closures and scene safety. While we were a quasi-governmental unit, we had no real authority outside of that allowed to us by the Fire Brigade Services Act, and often had motorists ignore our suggestions when it came to not driving through accident scenes. This meant the police units still had to smack PPs occasionally, and it was usually quite fun to watch. I had the pleasure of working the same stretch of freeway as a certain Metro Police motor unit, and I watched him screw with people a few times, and two specific times come to mind. The first time I saw this salty old bugger use his power of craphousery was after a multi-vehicle pileup just after an aggressive bend in the freeway that closed down 3 of the 4 lanes of traffic, causing a line of cars that stretched for a few kilometers back around the bend, meaning that cars at the rear could not see what was causing the delay up front. A number of drivers decided that they were too important to wait and drove up the hard shoulder, half on the road and half on the grass, to mosey on by the accident scene, leaving the rule-abiding drivers to sit in the hot sun looking at us with dismay. After a few of them snuck by, nearly hitting crews who were busy treating patients and almost taking out a recovery vehicle, this absolute stud of a man got fed up and moved his bike into the shoulder, but in such a way that they weren't able to see him. Every car he stopped got told to park up and wait while he waited for his next victim. After he collected about a gaggle of 20 of them, he slowly made his way up the line, ticket book in hand, to have an unhurried chat with each driver individually. Not only did I get to watch each idiot eat an almighty fine for leaving the roadway and ignoring emergency vehicles, they also had the pleasure of sitting there as the scene was cleared before being allowed back into traffic, turning a 20-minute delay into nearly an hour of baking in the noonday sun. There was much gnashing of teeth and mutterings of, "Don't you have anything better to do, officer?" While that was pretty funny to me, the best I saw of him was a few months later when we got a call for a scrap metal hauler that was quite impressively overloaded that had managed to roll over while on the 2-lane overpass connecting the same national freeway to the city freeway that led into the industrial area south of the city center. This thing must have been pushing 40,000 kilograms when it wedged itself, nose against the right-hand concrete barrier and tail digging a deep gouge into the counterpart barrier on the left. This meant that there wasn't a ball hair on either side of the truck, and traffic was diverted at the entrance to the overpass, around 500 meters up from the scene. I didn't technically need to be there at this point, as the driver had been taken to the hospital and the road was closed, awaiting the arrival of 2 heavy rigs to lift and recover the truck and the contents. I was leaning on my Suzuki, perving over to this officer's BMW R1200 RT when we noticed that the crew of the safety unit at the closure was having difficulty with a vehicle that seemed to think they were above the law, and were aggressively trying to get by the pickup, the cones, and the angry men in reflective gear. Seeing this and the potential for injury, he told them to wave the car through. As it zoomed down and then up to us on the top of the overpass, he winked at me, and when they stopped behind the very heavy and very wedged truck, he wandered over to have a chat with the driver, who was apparently the spokeswoman for the force-strong irritation of Karens within. The crux of his chat with her was that he certainly understood their point about needing to get to their highly important destination, but that the road that they had elected to use was currently blocked by 40 tons of mangled steel, and he was sure that they would agree that it would be dangerous for her to drive back against the traffic, considering that we had heavy rigs and support vehicles arriving and setting up. He apologized for the inconvenience, but directed them to park up by our bikes and wait for the rigs to do their thing, after which we could all be on our merry way. It took about an hour to get the road clear, after which they most definitely weren't making eye contact and appeared like beaten dogs as he finally wished them safe travels on their way. So, you won't believe the crazy showdown I had with the infamous HOA Karen who's been giving me heck for the past few months. Grab a drink and get comfy, cause this story is a wild ride. It all started when I moved into my dream house, this lovely little place nestled at the edge of a peaceful suburban neighborhood. Now, let me clarify one thing right away. I'm not part of the HOA, and I never plan to be. That's where Karen enters the scene. HOA Karen, who apparently thinks that she owns the entire neighborhood, made it her mission to get me into that HOA. She would bombard my mailbox with these fancy brochures, telling me how they'd make our neighborhood the epitome of perfection. But I'd seen enough stories to know how some HOAs can be a nightmare, so I politely declined. That's when the chaos began. Karen, who lived a few houses down, suddenly declared herself the queen of the neighborhood, or at least she acted like it. She started sending me all these letters and emails, claiming I was violating the mysterious and ever-changing rules of the HOA. She'd snap pictures of my yard, my fence, and even my mailbox as if they were federal offenses. I was having none of it. I checked my property deed and I confirmed there was no HOA clause, which I made very clear to Karen. She wasn't pleased. Every minor thing turned into a war. I left my trash can out too long. Karen reported it. My mailbox was the wrong shade of beige. You guessed it, Karen reported it. I'd go about my business, and then there she was, knocking on my door, wearing her "I am the law" expression, pointing out all the things that I needed to fix. It was like living next to a walking, talking citation book. One day, she claimed my rose bushes were violating some HOA guideline, and I'd had enough. I decided to have a calm, mature conversation with her. I know, crazy, right? But it seemed like the only way to settle this nonsense. So I invited Karen over. We sat in my backyard, sipping on iced tea. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I wasn't part of the HOA and she couldn't enforce their rules on my property. She, of course, disagreed, saying something about the greater good and property values. That's when I realized that Karen wasn't just an ordinary misguided neighbor. She was a full-fledged HOA vigilante, convinced that she had a divine mandate to regulate everything. It was like dealing with the self-appointed sheriff of suburbia. But I was determined to stand my ground. I told her that I wasn't going to change a thing on my property unless it was actually against city ordinances or the law. It felt like a small victory, but it was one that gave me a bit of relief. Of course, that didn't stop Karen. She'd lurk in her garden, watching me like a hawk. If I parked my car in the wrong direction for 2 seconds too long, she'd be on the phone to the HOA, demanding my immediate expulsion from the neighborhood. She even tried to organize a neighborhood meeting to get me kicked out. It all came to a head one sunny afternoon when I spotted Karen removing some potted plants from my front porch. I couldn't believe it. She was trespassing. I stormed out, yelling for her to stop. It was like a scene from one of those cheesy action movies, but with garden tools instead of guns. We got into a heated argument right there on my porch. I called her out on trespassing, and she retaliated by claiming that my porch plants violated HOA rules. I told her that was nonsense, but she insisted that they were against the greater good or something equally absurd. That's when I decided that I'd had enough. I wasn't going to let Karen push me around anymore. I reached out to the HOA board directly and I informed them of Karen's behavior, attaching evidence of her violations, which I had been meticulously documenting for a while. To my surprise, the HOA took it seriously. They launched an investigation into Karen's actions, and I could see her furious as the board inspected her property. She couldn't have expected this twist. Sure enough, they found numerous violations on her property, from unkempt lawns to unauthorized structures. She was fined a substantial amount, and she was livid. She accused me of being a snitch, but I couldn't care less. The tables had turned, and for the first time in a long while, I had the upper hand. Karen had been so focused on enforcing her own version of suburban law that she had ignored the actual rules and regulations. She stopped harassing me after the HOA cracked down on her. It was like a massive weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. I could finally enjoy my new home without fearing for some neighbor's daily surveillance. I must say, it felt good to take her down a notch. I'm all for maintaining a pleasant neighborhood, but there's a big difference between that and being an overzealous HOA enforcer. Thankfully, Karen learned that lesson the hard way. Karen chews us out of her milkshake. I get her fired, posted by Deleted. So I used to work at this restaurant in the downtown city. Terrible job experience, but it was a job. One day, we get slammed. Usually, it's because of a game night since this burger place is right behind the baseball field, but this day was different. First of all, I was already ticked. Coworker who thought he was the manager showed up an hour late, so I had to open the entire front of the restaurant alone within 30 minutes because people were already waiting in the parking lot. Coworker shows up, I don't say a word to him. Oh well, move on with the day. Day goes on, and I come in for my shift. Soccer teams come over after a tournament. I'm talking about 100 players with a line out the door. On shifts like this, some of the kitchen staff had to drop everything and help the other front of house employees, including myself, deliver orders because we're taking orders, cleaning tables, putting orders together, delivering them, serving drinks, and I did this when I was 18, and making milkshakes. Customers were great. All of the players that came in were so nice, and we had no issues, no impatience, no complaints, nothing. Just a nice day. They tipped us nicely as well, so we really appreciated that. I should probably mention at this point that we take DoorDash orders, which is where Karen comes in. For those of you who don't know, DoorDashers are people who are paid by a customer to go get food from a restaurant and bring it to them. We get in our usual rush, and me and 3 other coworkers are obviously multitasking and rushing to keep everybody happy. DoorDash tablet goes off. I confirm it and start prepping the order. Mind you, this included a milkshake. I'm not going to go ahead and make the milkshake because God only knows when this woman's going to show up. Rest of the order's ready to go, and she shows up while we're helping other customers. Now let me tell you about this woman. By definition, a Karen. She had the typical Karen cut with the eyes of a frickin' White Walker. I'm talking bright blue eyes, obviously fake. I mean, they were the Twitter logo blue and almost solid, and they just peer into your soul in a split second. I swear, I saw the gates of hell in her eyes. So I'm just going to call her Karen. She starts getting impatient and asks me how much longer it'll be. I apologize and tell her that it won't be much longer, and I go to start the milkshake. She starts flipping out at my coworkers, and as I'm passing her to get the rest of the DoorDash order, she starts laying it on me, screaming at me because I didn't have the milkshake ready and that I was costing her tips. The woman was wearing Lululemon yoga pants and had expensive collar contacts in. She would be fine without $3. Sort of manager comes out to talk to her. Let's call him C. C comes out and explains the situation. She doesn't accept what he's saying and starts screaming in front of 200 people about how she won't get tips and how hard it is to make one milkshake. Karen gives us the typical, I want to speak to the manager, and the manager just so happens to be C. He tells her that he is the manager, and he asks her to leave, and she continues her rant, calling C a coward about 5 or 6 times. Karen finally leaves. I'm fuming about this lunatic coming in and making everyone uncomfortable, so I do a little digging. Turns out, if you go onto the tablet, you can find the previous DoorDashers who come into the restaurant to get orders. I remember the name of the customer who ordered, so I go onto the tablet to find the DoorDasher's name. I find her name and the cell phone number on the order history and information. I get into contact with the DoorDash company and explain the harassment that we endured from Karen, and I give them her name and contact number, saying that she was from a certain city. They tell me they'll look into it. They contacted me later and informed me that it was taken care of and we never saw her again as she regularly took orders from us. We all went on our merry way and occasionally called each other cowards as our own little inside joke. Update, I feel as if we should specify this, but we also got a strongly worded email from this woman stating how ticked she was and blah blah blah, and how she mentioned that she lost her job because of it and that she knew one of us said something. I mean, duh. You want to send me home? Sounds good, posted by Sarasil. So I was a sarcastic and easily annoyed guy in my 20s, and this often didn't help me get along with older or corporate types. I was working at a certain pumpkin-colored big box home improvement store one spring in the flooring department. It was just starting to get warm out, and the store didn't have much AC, so I was looking forward to a magical date where certain employees were allowed to switch their pants for shorts. Problem is that we had a new department manager, I'll call him Dick, who was aggressively chasing a promotion to assistant manager and then store manager. He thought that he could accomplish that by being a super by-the-book hardbutt and being relentlessly metrics focused. This translated into a manager who was a know-it-all micromanaging jerk. Anyway, I'm scheduled to open at 5 a.m. one day, and on the fabled day of cooler bottom wear, and I walk in all light and airy and bare-legged. Dick, who was overnight manager the previous night, saw me and threw a fit. "Why are you out of uniform?" he asked. "Well, I'm not. I can wear shorts starting today," I proclaimed. "Not in your position in your department. Who told you that you could?" he retorted. "The employee handbook and SOP? I can show you if you don't believe me," I offered. "I know the SOP in your department doesn't get to wear shorts. That's only garden. Go home and change right now," he demanded, face getting redder from my defiance. Okay, Dick, if that's how you want to play it, I'll be back in an hour," I sighed. "Maybe the loss of an hour of pay will teach you something." So I know better. The reason I know better is because I'm one of the weirdos who actually read the entire standard operating procedure document, the employee handbook, which is actually just a subsection of the SOP, and I really hate being wrong, so I check the SOP before doing anything different day to day. In my store, the SOP was like invoking God. If the SOP said so, that won every single argument. So I go home, change into pants, but bring my shorts back to work with me. By now, Dick's shift is over, and I asked the new morning manager on duty, Darren, to meet with me. "Why, what's up?" Just an SOP issue." "Oh, okay, give me like 10 minutes. So I swung by my desk and printed out several things. 1. My latest pay stub that included my official job title and department number. 2. The company directory that listed the department names and their associated numbers. 3. The SOP that dealt with when and which departments and employees can wear shorts. And 4. The annual email from the regional VP confirming which departments could wear shorts, starting when, which also included the line, "And this letter is to be posted at the time clock between the dates of XX and Y." 5. The SOP detailing the company transportation and mileage reimbursement policy. And 6. A Google Maps route that mirrored the route that I take to and from work, with the total mileage highlighted. So I meet with Darren, and I explained what happened and handed him each page in turn as they became relevant. At the end, we agreed that I was right on every single account and asked me what I wanted. 1. I want the time. I was turned away before I could clock in, so I want to be paid starting at 5 a.m. Feel free to check the CCTV if you want to confirm when I arrived. I want the mileage because Dick sent me on essentially a company errand with my own vehicle through no fault of my own. 3. I want this letter posted at the clock like it says it's supposed to be. 4. I want you to talk to Dick about this because I told him this was the SOP before he sent me home. And 5. I'm changing back into my shorts. All of this sounds more than fair. Get the paperwork for the clock adjustment and the mileage to me today and I'll sign it. The letter mysteriously went missing from the time clock the next day, but I replaced it every day until I happened to see Dick angrily snatch it off the board and throw it away. I reported that as well, and the letter stopped going missing. He didn't talk to me much, and I was transferred to another department a month later, so all in all, win-win, I think. Too young to do my job? Okay, posted by BPD 2000. Back in my college days in the late 90s, I worked in my college's Alumni Communications Center. In reality, it's a call center where college students worked to ask the low-giving alumni for money. The college had professional folks to handle the big mega donors. I luckily wasn't a student caller, which seemed awful. I, a sophomore, was, and this was the official job title, data entry. A quick sidebar, we also had a couple of call coaches who were seniors who would monitor the callers and give them feedback on how to do a better job at asking alumni for money. Typically, donations in the $100 to $250 range. When callers made a call, they recorded the outcome of the call on a sheet of paper. I would then collect these sheets and then go to the sole computer in the caller center and record the data. Most of the results I entered would be no answer or left a message on a voice machine. Sometimes we got a donation. So I would enter that caller outcome into the computer, and somewhere else, the alumni department would generate a donation envelope that was mailed to the alumnus, so the alumnus could mail a check back to us. Now, about 10% of the donations would be by credit card. At the end of the night, after the callers left, I would spend about 30 minutes processing the credit cards through this dial-up credit card machine. I did this without issue for 2 months, September and October. Now enters Karen, the new boss lady over the call center. She finally notices the extra 30 minutes on my timesheet each day and asks me about it sometime in late October. I tell her that I process the credit cards after everyone leaves for the night. That's how I was trained by the previous data entry person. This upsets Karen, who says I am far too young to be handling credit card information. Makes it clear that I am to stick to my job of only entering the caller's data. Period. End of story. Data entry only. No handling the money. The money is to be handled only by the grown-ups. To be perfectly clear, these were credit card numbers handwritten on a sheet of paper. Absolutely no cash money involved on my end. So, you got it, condescending Karen. I stopped processing the credit card donations. I set them in a pile at the end of the night right by the credit card machine. And with each passing night, the pile grows and grows. November ends, and this pile is now 250 pages or so thick. It also wasn't my job to ask questions like, who's processing the credit card sheets? Since the month ended and no credit cards were processed, Karen absolutely failed to hit her fundraising goals. She starts to berate the call coaches and the callers for not doing a good enough job. Karen starts spending more time in the call center watching everything and everyone like a hawk. I continue to do exactly what I was told to do. One day, she would offer a prize, like a college hat, and then the next, a long lecture about how everyone shouldn't be lazy. Over the course of December, I keep adding to the pile of unprocessed credit cards. It's a good 500 pages thick by now. Compared to the massive pile of sheets of no answers and left a message, it's not very noticeable. Naturally, someone in the alumni department has noticed that the donations coming in are down about 25% over November and December. This results in me coming back from Christmas break, where I get to meet Cool Chad, the new boss dude over the call center. He asks if my job includes processing credit cards. I told him that Karen told me not to, but I was trained to process them. In fact, I'm the only one who's been trained how to process them. He says, cool, please do process the credit cards. Cool Chad asks if there are any unprocessed credit card sheets. Oh yeah, there are. Cool Chad then asked me if I could get this done over the next couple of weeks. Oh, sure, no problem. I spent several hours over a couple of Saturdays processing the credit cards. Cool Chad has the absolute best January ever in the history of the call center. The quotes are paraphrasing, it's been over 25 years. Why is Cool Chad Cool Chad? In February, Cool Chad gave me a raise from $8 an hour to $10 an hour. Thanks, Cool Chad. This HOA president was terrible, so I was living a peaceful life in my cozy home on the street, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing just a few doors down. It all started when the ever so powerful and slightly sinister HOA president decided that he had his sights set on my house. I'd never been a part of the homeowners association, mostly because I preferred to have the freedom to paint my house any color that I please or plant whatever flowers I desired. The HOA president had always seemed to harbor a particular animosity toward me. Perhaps it was because I had a house that he secretly coveted, or maybe it was simply because I didn't conform to his vision of a perfectly manicured neighborhood. The signs of trouble began to surface when I received a letter in the mail one sunny morning. It was from the HOA, you guessed it, stating that they had placed a lien on my property for unpaid dues. It just was absurd because I wasn't even a member, and I certainly hadn't received any bills from them. The HOA president was using scare tactics to force me out, and I was determined not to give in. I knew my rights, and I knew that they could not legally put a lien on my property. I decided to confront that HOA president, hoping that a simple conversation could resolve the matter. I knocked on his door. My heart was pounding in my chest as I prepared for our showdown. The HOA president, with a smug grin on his face, welcomed me into his living room. "What brings you here, neighbor?" he asked, feigning politeness. I cut right to the chase. "Mr. President, I am not a part of the HOA, and I've never received any bills from you. Why'd you put a lien on my house?" He chuckled condescendingly and said, "Oh, you see, there must have been a mix-up, but if you can cooperate and sell me your house, we can make this all go away. It's a win-win for both of us." I was just taken aback by his audacity. He wanted my house, and he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. "HOA, Mr. President, I'm not selling my home. This is my property, and you have no right to do this." His face turned red with anger, and he shouted, "If you don't cooperate, I'll make sure that lien sticks, and you'll have a hard time ever selling your house to anyone else." I left his house, seething with anger and frustration. It was clear that the HOA president was willing to go to great lengths to get what he wanted, but I wasn't about to back down. So I decided to do some digging of my own. I went to the county office to check the records, and what I discovered left me in shock. The HOA president had tried to put the lien on my house under the table without the knowledge of the rest of the HOA. It was a blatant violation of their rules, and he had knowingly hidden it from everyone else. Armed with this evidence, I attended the next HOA meeting. I presented the documents that proved the HOA president's deceit. The room fell silent as everyone looked at the incriminating paperwork. The atmosphere in the room grew tense, and the tension was palpable. The other board members were a mix of shock and anger. They exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the magnitude of the HOA president's actions. The HOA president's face turned ashen, and he just stammered, "This is all a misunderstanding, and never intended for this to happen. It's a clerical error." But the other board members were not convinced. They were furious at the breach of trust. One of them, she was a tall and stern woman, spoke up. Her voice was just quivering with anger at this point. "HOA president, you've crossed a line that can't be ignored. You're dismissed from the HOA board, effective immediately." The room erupted into a heated debate as other board members voiced their outrage. The confrontation was fierce, and it was clear that the majority stood with the evidence and the rules of the HOA. The HOA president was ousted, though, and my house was free from the wrongful lien. As I walked out of that meeting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The HOA president's jealousy and greed had finally caught up with him, and justice had prevailed. I returned home, relieved that my house was safe from the clutches of this power-hungry former HOA president. This next one's a massive multi-part HOA madness story, and you'll love it. I asked one of my neighbor friends to run for board because I liked her. She got on and is suddenly such a politician and is now trying to take over the Facebook group for the neighborhood that I run. Posted by Queasy Calendar 6597. FHOA. So my neighborhood is small. You might remember me. We'll check those stories in a moment. We have 30 homeowners and 85 homes owned by AMH, formerly AH4R. Our Facebook group is small. 58 people right now, to be exact. It was created by a renter back in August of 2022. I found it in September, and after finding a scammer in the group, the creator and admin, let's call her Kate, decided to make me admin. I also worked hard to get every homeowner possible in there as I started posting things about the HOA. Anytime I see in another group someone state that they live in the same neighborhood, I send them a message to join and so on. I never delete posts, and people post whatever they want. Yesterday, I get a message from Kate stating that she received a message from my friend, let's call her Becky, with the following message. "Hey girl, this is completely random, but I was wondering if we can add a couple more admins of the Facebook group since we're growing more and more? Or at least one more, me? If not, I completely understand. I just thought I would reach out to see your thoughts on that, smiley. My intentions are not to change anything, just to have extra hands and just in case anyone moves and so on." Becky knows I run the group. Becky has offered her help in the past and I declined it. Kate really does nothing in the group, as she's basically handed it over to me, since she's never ran a group before and I have. Plus, she's a renter and has no intention on being around forever. I let Kate know that Becky is on the HOA board, and I don't believe Becky should be an admin of the group as well, nor do we need more admins, but it's totally up to her. She agrees and tells me, thanks to you, it's all under control, that the group is mine and yada yada. Now, during this, another neighbor, let's name her Liz, makes a post in the group basically saying that all the work that Alex and I, which we'll talk about in just a moment, wasn't good enough because we didn't hand out flyers making everyone aware of the second HOA meeting. Currently, a group of 6 people in the neighborhood are organizing a little neighborhood get-together, with the main organizer being, let's call this neighbor Annie, who I'm also friends with. They had flyers passed out to everyone in the neighborhood. The post said, "I just wanted to say a huge thank you to whoever took the time to put out the meet and greet flyers door to door. Not everyone has social media, so I believe this Facebook group should not be the main form of communication for community events. So for example, HOA meetings. If the community is so passionate about homeowners having more influence in the HOA committee, why not put the effort into informing said individuals? Just my 2 cents. Well, guess what? Bob, who's Annie's husband, the one Liz is praising while downplaying what Alex and I did for the HOA, was the one who was supposed to do that, and didn't, but didn't tell Alex and I that he didn't do it until the actual meeting. I commented this, not naming the person, and Liz responds with, "Oh, that comment wasn't meant to put blame on anyone. It was meant to raise awareness. There have been 2 HOA meetings, and there wasn't much notification for that first one either." Alex becomes ticked and starts commenting back to all these people defending mine and his actions. Becky is being a fake politician. Coincidence that Liz posts this while Becky is trying to become an admin and to make her little clique admins? I think not. I messaged Becky basically asking, what the heck? All I get is messages like, "I didn't mean it like that," and "I only messaged her because she's a creator versus you're an admin," that she wanted to be an admin in case anyone moves. Yeah, okay, fake. I told her, sure, if you ever have concerns about how this page is being managed in the future, please don't hesitate to inform me. If people relocate, they can remove themselves voluntarily. It seems that you all have conveyed that the effort that Alex and I put into everything was not satisfactory, and that's alright. Hope you have a pleasant evening. Like, okay, bye, jerk. If you have an issue with the group, you make your own. Shaking my head. So yesterday around 5:30 p.m., Alex makes a post in the neighborhood group, tagging the board members, Becky, James, and Jacob, asking if there's any updates on what's going on with the HOA, as far as officer positions, the next HOA meeting, and so on, as he's received the annual bill again. About 15 minutes later, James comments and says, "We have a meeting at 6 today to discuss." I see that, and I comment asking what exactly constituted a closed board meeting, because otherwise, state law requires 48 hours of notice to owners and an open board meeting. Approximately 2 hours later, around 8 p.m., he deletes his comment, and so begins the attempt to cover it up. Don't worry, I screenshot it knowing he'd likely delete it. Now at approximately 9:45 p.m., Jacob decides to post the following to the neighborhood group. Due to feedback from community members, there is a rising concern that HOA posts are cluttering a community page primarily comprised of renters. At this time, I kindly ask that posts involving the HOA be avoided here, out of courtesy to all of our neighbors, until we can establish proper channels, a place to express, and most importantly, address concerns that are established. Details will be forthcoming as they are available. Well. Who does this guy think he is, dictating what can and cannot be said regarding the HOA in a neighborhood Facebook group ran by myself and a renter? Alex comments on it in confusion as to why, in a neighborhood group, would we not be allowed to discuss things affecting the neighborhood. I delete the post. I message Jacob stating, "Hey, if you have a concern with the way that the page is ran, you're more than welcome to bring your own concerns to me. But you do not make the rules of the page. If the HOA wants to make a Facebook group, awesome. But as for the neighborhood group, it is going to remain open to discuss any issues that anybody sees fit." He types and stops over and over and does not reply. He then proceeds to go to Alex's original post and comments, "Hey Alex, I was in the middle of responding, but my post was deleted, so I didn't get a chance to respond there. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. The purpose of asking that the HOA post be avoided in the community page was to buy time and avoid people leaving the group until we can find a more formal venue. While Facebook is a great tool, a portal to submit concerns and items for meetings would be more beneficial in the long run, in my opinion. I delete that comment as well. He then decides to message me back stating, "It is unfortunate that you missed the part where I asked," and "K." I reply stating, No, I absolutely didn't. This is the first time that I've had to delete a post like this. As a board member, you should not be trying to control the conversation about the HOA. For reference as well, not even half the members on the page are renters." No reply back, of course. I knew Becky was trying to do some crap when she tried to weasel her way into being an admin. They want to control the narrative regarding the HOA. I updated the group rules this morning to state that it is an open discussion group, and we encourage open discussion on any topic that involves our community. This may include discussions about homeowners association, HOA matters, issues with the rental companies in our area, city news affecting our neighborhood, and other relevant local topics. However, please note that this group is independently run by neighborhood residents, which is not affiliated with any official organization or governing body. I woke up to this post, posted 6 hours ago, from James. I've tried to be civil and just ignore what has been going on through this page, but I've had enough. There are many homeowners who are upset at the behavior of one of the administrators. Whether she is on the main page stirring up contention or threatening lawsuits or direct messaging and harassing and belittling homeowners, this behavior, in my opinion, is unacceptable. Instead of this community page being a resource to connect with everyone, it is a hostile, toxic environment. Because of this, I and many other people am leaving this page and will look to start a new page where this type of environment will not exist. I know I am not alone in this, and it's unfortunate that we have to start another page from scratch, but several of us have tried to remedy this current page with no success. We are still figuring out how to run the HOA, as all the members who actually were voted on to that board are very green and have to learn what we're doing. Once we figure that out, we will have a way to communicate official HOA news and updates through whatever management company we can find to fit our needs. We will also be posting relevant information about the HOA on that other page, though it shouldn't be much given that we only have a few small parcels of land to manage. The HOA board for the following message is as follows. James is the president, Becky's vice president, and Jacob is treasurer and secretary. Hopefully this post stays up long enough for people to see before being deleted like other posts from other members. Y'all, I am sick of these people. I commented back and stated, I updated the rules for that reason. Jacob attempting to make a rule on what should and shouldn't be talked about on this page was inappropriate. The concern should have been brought to me prior to posting it. As for your secret board meeting, it's a big problem. That was legally required to be an open board meeting. I will not be deleting this post. Jacob's post was the first post I've deleted because of his ask for a rule to be made. You cannot control what is said about the HOA, and you shouldn't, because that's a huge no-no in the HOA board world. Alex's question was totally an appropriate ask, which, by the way, you did not have to respond to, but you did, exposing that you were having a closed board meeting with no announcement. The next part's called, "We got railroaded by the rental company that owns most of the homes in our subdivision for board seats," also posted by Queasy Calendar 6597. Prefacing this by stating, we had already checked with not one, but 2 lawyers, and they both have told us the rental company can only have 1 person on the board. The rental company also told us they only wanted 1 seat. Had our meeting to elect the first ever board for this HOA that's been non-existent. 12 out of 30 of the non-rental households showed up less than our last meeting in April. Up until this point, AMH, formerly AH4R, told us that they wanted 1 board seat with 1 of the officer positions. Well, apparently 30 minutes before the meeting, AMH texts Alex, him and I are who organized this meeting, and tells him here's our 4 people we're putting on the board. We tell the lady that shows both of the lawyers that we've talked to said that you can only have one board seat, so this rep that they sent as their proxy gets another one on the phone, and this lady on the phone is going ballistic about how they own the majority of the homes in the neighborhood, and therefore they get to have all the seats they want, and that their legal team told them that. The rep that they sent then proceeds to throw an absolute fit, that instead of me printing them 85 ballots for each lot, that I printed one ballot that states multiple addresses and has every lot number of theirs listed. She starts hooting and hollering about how I need to print them 85 ballots and mail them out. I said, excuse me, but the voting has to be taken in person or by proxy, which is also in person per the CC&Rs and the bylaws. So here's your ballot. Make the votes on that. She then marks a snarky butt comment that they are write-in candidates. Like bro, you literally gave us names 30 minutes before the meeting. She then gets all ticked at Alex and I, stating that we railroaded them. And at this point, Alex was getting ticked. He's usually pretty hard to get a read on how he's feeling, but he was definitely getting mad, as he's been the one in communication with them for the last month and a half. AMH refused to budge, so what ended up happening, and as it currently stands, was they have 4 seats and us homeowners have 3. I had almost the lowest amounts of votes for me on the ballots, 6 out of 12. There was obviously a communication between a couple of the men there not to vote for me, because they're friends with my loser butt next door neighbor, who we haven't gotten along with from the jump. These people have zero idea what me and Alex have been doing and dealing with in the background, and what type of prep went into this meeting, and I believe that they think being on the board will be a piece of cake and that they don't really have to do anything. One of the women, who I personally asked to volunteer to be on the ballot, got the 3rd homeowner board seat. As we were chatting on Facebook yesterday, she basically snaps at me because we disagree on how to handle AMH, and I told her that she was being a little too nonchalant about things, and that the new board isn't looped in to what me and Alex have been dealing with. She goes on to say, well, why aren't we looped in? And I told her, look lady, none of you were involved. Not once did any of you ever offer to help or do anything to help. I'm the one that asked you to be on the ballot for the board in the first freaking place. So she sends a snarky reply of, well, yep, that's correct. Now it's time to step up, yada yada. Basically, that my assistance was no longer needed. So I thumbed it up and went on about my day. She messages me an hour and a half later, apologizing, stating, sorry, just wanted to apologize if I came off not caring. That's not my intentions. Just ran into some personal things, and messaging you at the same time, my mind was in 2 places. Thank you for your knowledge. I tell her, no problem at all. If you feel confident in handling things, I wish you the best of luck. Just to clarify, I have no issues with you personally, which is why I wanted you to join the ballot. However, regarding board member number 1 and 2, and the board in general, I've decided not to provide any further assistance or knowledge. They have an issue with me, and that's fine, but I have no desire to deal with it anymore due to that. I still intend to assist homeowners in understanding things, however. It then triggers a wait, what type of response from her. I go on to explain that it's obvious a bunch of them all voted together and voted out of spite, not out of skills. She then begins to realize how screwed up the vote was. Neither me nor Alex made the board. The 2 people who have worked on it the most, she is now like, oh crap, and that they definitely banded against me, and begins trying to figure out a way to do a revote or have new votes cast. And I told her, nope, sorry, no way to redo anything unless it comes back that AMH cannot have those 4 seats that they took, but that's for the lawyers to figure out. So now we're at a standstill again, and basically it has to go legal. Oh man, what happens if people are going against the CC&Rs and bylaws? I'm going to preface this with, I'm a rule follower. If there's a hard written rule, I'll follow it. Now let's get into the story in question. Utah, 2020 to 21, new build community. The HOA has basically been non-existent. No meetings, no contact. Paid dues are due in April 2022. In February, we all get bills stating that all of our dues were due in January. Makes 0 sense since our dues have always been April. So that kind of sparks interest for people to finally start poking around. This is a cheap HOA. We have no big parcels of land, there's just an itty bitty weird strips around the neighborhood, and it's about $11 a month. Now, I, for one, had already done a crap ton of research on everything back in September 22 when I was having issues with my trashy neighbor. So I was extremely familiarized with our CC&Rs and bylaws, and I was already aware that we were screwed as the homeowners. Let me preface this part by stating, no, I am not going to sell my house and move. I don't give a crap what this company does, since, like I said previously, I'm a rule follower. On to the story again. Our community is comprised of 115 houses. 30 of the houses are homeowners. 85 is owned by AMH, formerly AH4R. Now, the way of our CC&R and bylaws are written, each of the owners of the lot are entitled to one vote per lot owned, which means that AMH gets 73% of the voting and we only get 27% as actual homeowners. In turn, this basically means that we have no control unless we can get AMH on our side. Like I said, I don't care either way. Now, our declarant released their hold of the HOA back in August 22 and didn't notify anyone, including AMH. So it's been sitting with no board, no nothing. We were supposed to do a meeting within 90 days of the declarant releasing hold, but obviously we weren't aware that they did. This neighbor of mine lives across the street. His name is Alex. Alex was all gung-ho about getting a meeting set up. My mom died 3 weeks before all this started going on, so I obviously had a lot going on. He asked me to set it up, and I told him no, I have a lot going on and that he can set it up if he would like to. Afterward, he kept arguing with me about the AMH homes being included. He reached out to the company that does our financial side of the HOA, and they, of course, confirmed my understanding of the HOA. But keep in mind, they're only the financial management and obviously aren't lawyers or experts in bylaws and CC&Rs. So then that company tells them, well, you can still set up a meeting, and if AMH doesn't show, we can still vote and get everything done. And I told him, okay, if that's your understanding, set up the meeting. But I'm just telling you right now that the rules require 67% of votes of all members to change anything. He says he's not going to jump through hoops for this. A couple of weeks go by, and I message him saying, I assume you're not setting up a meeting? Well, that sparked a fire under his butt, so he goes off about how he had something come up at work and blah blah blah, and that if I want to take over, do so. I remind him my mom literally died, so no, I don't have the time. The next day he sets up the meeting, an unofficial meeting we held earlier this month to discuss as homeowners the next step. A couple of days before the meeting, he starts in on me again about how he thinks AMH homes are not part of it and yada yada. I again show him where it is in the documents. Fast forward to the meeting, and he's getting everybody all hyped up on getting the board going and doing all this and that. And there's another neighbor. We'll call him Bob. Bob is a city planner for a different city, but he's still a city planner, so he knows a bit, but he's trying to convince everybody that AMH cannot come in and basically take over the HOA. I keep reiterating that the way our rules are written, yeah, they can, and they are basically required to be involved in anything we do because they control the vote. But he's like in this weird, no, that's not how it works, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, whatever, so I just kind of ignore it. So Alex starts talking about setting up the next meeting so that we can establish a board. So I told him that I think we should have a lawyer look over the documents first before we make any moves on anything, because you guys are basically going against all the rules that we have. Bob states that he already has a lawyer on retainer for the HOA because he has hookups, obviously, as a city planner. So he states that he will find out some details from the lawyer. Now, last night, Alex messages me and lets me know that he sent out an email to everybody that attended and that he set up a meeting for May and that AMH will be there. He states that it's for setting up a board and that we'll be voting for 3 people, president, secretary, and treasurer. I message him and let him know that, FYI, the rules state that there has to be 7 board members, so I'm not sure how you want to go about that, but that's what's in the rules. He then starts sending me a series of questions. Can you point me to that in the bylaws? Where in the CC&Rs does it state that everyone has to vote? When I was looking at the declarant, they only had 3 people on the board when they were the declarant. So I pull up the documents. I cite all my sources for each one. For question 3, the answer was the same as question 1. It states in there that during the declarant's control, there's a board member of 3. After the declarant's control, it's 7 board members. So then he asked me, do you know who the declarant is currently? and I told him there is no longer a declarant. That was YXC developer who released their hold. So then he asked, so there's no declarant presently? And so I told him, no, there is no declarant. There never will be a declarant again. They released their hold. Then he basically just changes the subject onto something different about the HOA with AMH. Why this dude won't read the documents himself is beyond me, and why Bob keeps trying to manipulate the wording to fit his narrative is also beyond me. I'm trying my best, but I'm obviously not a lawyer, and I feel like these two people are misleading everyone else. Bob has still not gotten updates from the lawyer. Declarant cannot become a thing again, right? So this is a proposed resolution to our issues, the declarant release control in August 2022. So option 3 says since the developer released the control, there's currently no declarant. So one idea is to see if AMH can be given declarant control of the HOA. Either developer does this, or through some legal process, they can be named declarant. If by some legal means that they can be, it's an option for the homeowners to allow AMH to be the declarant. In this case, AMH will release the financial management company, hire their own financial and maintenance companies, causing the HOA dues to be increased. Alright, so now Alex, who keeps saying he's stepping down after this meeting, wants to be put on the ballot for board and wants to be president of the board. And Bob heard back from his lawyer, who he obviously gave no background to, came back to him and obviously didn't read the documents in detail. They're trying to argue that we don't have to have a board of 7, only 3, 5, or 7, and that the CC&Rs override the bylaws. Yet, the passage in the CC&Rs tells us to refer to the bylaws for specifics on the board, and that during the declarant's control, it will be no less than 3 and no more than 7. I don't know why I bother, no one wants to listen anyways. How do we even handle voting of the board? Do we allow each vote to vote for multiple people? Because otherwise, we could have one vote for 30 different people. Another Bob update. Woke up just now from a creak in my bedroom, thought I was gonna die. Anywho, got on our group and Bob has commented the following. It appears you've got a complete and clear understanding of what the CC&Rs and bylaws say, so I guess I'm wondering why I even asked a 15-year land use attorney to review our boilerplate CC&Rs and inform us of what it says, if we are going to think that we understand it better. Please do not ask me to ask him any additional questions. It was a waste of his and my time. And, actually, please remove my name from the ballot. I am no longer interested in serving on this board. If someone writes my name on the ballot and people vote for me, I will decline the position. It will just be a waste of a vote. Y'all, I cannot deal with the drama of Bob. Like, goodbye. If you're trying to make me look like a bad person, and if people believe that, yeah, sure, okay. Y'all HOA people are just a bunch of idiots anyways. ETA, I already hired my own real estate and HOA lawyer yesterday. Naval officer didn't want to live with enlisted, gets fired. Posted by I Love Boba 43. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard on the news how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Now, I did find out this is not a private letter, and he did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. So for example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers, and 2 are for officers since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what's allowed. If there's limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put wherever there is space. So, our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some of the quotes in his letter, and yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happens in enlisted housing. There are also assaults sexually and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives on enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officer wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are drug users, PERS, criminals, etc. The kicker? He was an enlisted Army member before going to officer school. So, in civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent alcoholics, drug users, etc., based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and, maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life by denying days off, making you stay late, writing you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was ticked, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon, and I figure I'd have some fun before I get out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards, but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went at work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside, and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to be swept under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. Oh, and by the way, the hatchet became a symbol of enlisted deviance because in his letter, he stated that 2 gangs were attacking each other with hatchets and other weapons at an enlisted housing unit. Now this comment says that I remember when this got international press attention. All the Navy said was he had been disciplined but would not release details. And OP said that he found out from buddies who were stationed there when it all went down, and angry cops did a follow-up. Kevina teacher meets Kevina student, posted by IsKimGeek. So, I was both a Kevin and encountering a Kevin in this one, and the stupidity on display is in the social skills department on both sides. Some context. My family was military, and so by 3rd grade, I was on my 4th school. I started in a jurisdiction where kids can go to school or preschool from age 3, and my folks opted for school because I was G&T, so it's not as much as it seems. G&T is the gifted and talented program. G&T kids seem to run to 2 extremes, weird quiet ones, and weird ones who are physically incapable of tolerating boredom or wrongness. Guess which one I was? I'll give you a hint. Once, when I was about 5, my 9-year-old cousin sat on me because my fidgeting was annoying her too much. So I started wiggling my toes and my fingers. And yes, I'm being evaluated as an adult for ADHD. Why do you ask? Anyway, Kevina the teacher, for her part, was the kind of old school teacher that cannot admit an error, penalizes kids for mastering the material by basically putting you in timeout for the rest of the class, and was overall a nasty, cruel bully who shouldn't be in charge of a goldfish, let alone 32 kids between the ages of 7 and 9. We got on about as well as elemental potassium and water, is what I'm saying. YouTube has some cool videos on that if you're not a chemistry type. Back to the story. This is a tale of my first interaction of Kevina and how I managed to start my first period of my first day of my first week of a new grade at a new school with my first ever in-school suspension, setting a new record for speed of getting crap in school in the extended family that stands to this day. First impressions, I'm good at them. So, first period was a bit of a deal because I was young for the grade because of differences in age cutoffs in different regions, and my prematurity I'd effectively skipped a grade. And I was small for my age, so they actually had to get a kindergarten desk brought up because I couldn't see over my desk. Yeah, I was tiny. Eventually, the dust settles with the desk that I can actually use and see over. But by now, the entire class is aware that I'm the weird kid who's too short for a normal desk, and I'm already getting the short joke. Great. So, being my G&T self in a mainstream program for the first time, I'm thinking, I got this. Other programs, it was cool to be good at math, so I just show off my algebra and pre-calculus, and I can recover, right? Current me looking at kid me like, oh honey, no. Ever heard the phrase, for a smart kid, they sure can be stupid? That was me. Book smart, socially oblivious, too impulsive for good judgment. So, the teacher starts the review with addition. I'm a bit insulted. I mean, I'm good at math, but in the old district, mainstream kids started long multiplication in 3rd grade, and 2nd grade material was multiplication and division, and some simple geometry, not addition and subtraction, which was kindergarten and 1st grade material. My thinking was along the lines of, they might not be good at math, but don't call them stupid, teacher. Unfortunately, this sense of being insulted for my classmates doesn't come out. What I say is, in my old school, we did long division. This is too easy. Yeah, I was referred for an ASD assessment the previous year, so that tracks with my childhood social skills. That's autism spectrum disorder. And the teacher replies, well, if it's so easy, you can show the class how to do this one. And she writes 2 times 3 equals on the board. Triumphantly, I say 6. And the teacher says, no, it's not, it's 5. I guess kids at your old school aren't that good at math. She turned back to write another problem. I was shocked. After I recovered my jaw from the floor, I stuttered a bit and finally blurted, "That's wrong." The teacher, let me tell you, knew how to turn around ominously. I grew up in an authoritarian household, and I knew it was possible to wash dishes ominously and call someone's name ominously, but not turning around. That was new. Excuse me, what was that, dear? This wasn't the dear of a sweet older lady talking to a kid. This was a saccharine, fake sweet Atlantic Canada dear that can mean anything you want it to. And right now, it meant a string of profane insults so long it'll probably hit the word limit. Think how US Southerners can say F you stupid idiot with a, oh bless your heart, that kind of dear. And bless my socially oblivious little heart, I didn't pick up what she was putting down. 2 times 3 isn't 5. That'd be 2 plus 3. 2 times 3 is 6. A reasonable adult would admit the error and move on, even if I was being a right little pastor about it. Not Kevina. No, the answer is 5. That's final. A socially savvy kid would have recognized that tone and dropped it. Not me. No, I had the bit in my teeth. She was wrong, and I couldn't just let her sit in her wrongness, being wrong at me. This wouldn't stand. She's a teacher. She's supposed to know better. Why are you being stupid about this? Excuse me? A teacher should know the difference between addition and multiplication, miss. You're wrong, and I can prove it. I stood up from my desk. I am not wrong, she said as she stalked towards me and my desk. You're new, and you want to make an impression on the class, but this isn't the way to do it. She pushed me back into my chair and continued. You will sit and not say another word if you want to not spend the rest of your first day in the office. Smugly, she turned to return to the board. But I had spent 7 years mastering the ability to walk quiet enough to avoid my father's rage, and she was wrong. This wrongness couldn't be tolerated. I followed her. She didn't notice until I was drawing on the board. I drew 2 sets of 3 lines and circled each. To the class, I said, 2 3s is 6, and I counted the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. Then I drew a pair of lines and another set of 3 and circled each. To the class, I announced 2 plus 3 is 5. I counted the 5 lines one by one, stabbing my chalk into the board each time. And the last one I did hard enough that the chalk broke. I looked her in the face. Speaking with the blunt, brutal honesty of a socially inept child with no filter, I said, You're wrong. If you don't know the difference, should you really be teaching us? Maybe you should be in 3rd grade math and I can teach math. And that was when she grabbed me by the collar and dragged me to the office. It set the tone for our relationship and remains one of my funniest memories from the 3rd grade.